Tokyo. A boy walks through Harajuku with no plan, no spotlight, no reason to believe the world would ever know his name. A stranger stops him, not for who he is, but for what he could be. That single encounter would ignite a journey through fear, fame, and fragile identity. He would learn that greatness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. This is the story of Kento Yamazaki, the quiet storm who taught the world that stillness can change everything. Chapter 1. The Boy in Harajuku. The sound of a soccer ball echoes through a narrow Tokyo street. The thud of leather against pavement, laughter carried on the wind, the rhythm of an ordinary day. The sun leans low, painting Harajuku in soft gold. Crowds move like rivers between shops and flashing billboards. But in the middle of it all, a quiet teenager slows his steps. His name is Kento Yamazaki, and he doesn't yet know that this walk will divide his life into before and after. He's just come from a casual match with friends, his uniform still damp, his mind lost in daydreams. He doesn't crave attention. In fact, he avoids it. He's the kind of boy people pass by without noticing, polite, reserved, always watching more than speaking. But fate, as it often does, has its own plans. A stranger approaches. A man with a clipboard, a business card, and an eye for what others overlook. He studies Kento for a moment, then says words that sound unreal. Have you ever considered modeling? Kento laughs nervously. Modeling? Him? It sounds absurd. He's never been told he's handsome. At school, he blends in. Quiet grades, quiet voice, quiet dreams. Yet something in the man's tone feels certain, like this isn't luck, it's recognition. That night, he turns the card over again and again. He can feel two versions of himself tugging at each other. The safe boy who follows the expected path, and the unknown one who steps into risk. Somewhere deep inside, curiosity wins. The next week, Kento finds himself in a small photography studio. White walls, bright lights, a lens staring back at him like an interrogation. Every click feels like exposure, not of his face, but of his uncertainty. He doesn't know how to pose, doesn't know what expression to give. The photographer tells him to relax, but how do you relax when you've never believed you belong here? His hands tremble. He looks at his reflection and doesn't see a model. He sees a boy pretending to be someone else. And yet, when the photos come out, there's something different. Something honest. Not arrogance, not polish, but raw stillness. The quiet that the world had ignored suddenly becomes his signature. He doesn't realize it yet, but that stillness will one day define him. In the early months, the modeling world feels alien. Everyone speaks louder, moves faster. Photographers demand charisma. Brands demand confidence. Kento feels like an imposter at every shoot, the outsider faking belonging. But imposters who stay long enough eventually turn into professionals. And quietly, beneath the noise, Kento studies. He watches how others carry themselves, how they breathe, how they hide fear behind smiles. Every frame becomes a silent classroom. Every mistake, a lesson in humility. He begins to understand something profound. Destiny doesn't always arrive in glory. Sometimes it sneaks in disguised as coincidence, a chance meeting, a stranger's eye, a single question that rewrites your future. Still, even as he learns, a part of him resists. His parents worry. Modeling feels unstable, not a real path. His classmates whisper that he's changing, that fame is making him distant. The truth is simpler, he's scared. Scared of wanting something bigger. Scared of becoming visible. Because visibility means vulnerability. At night, Kento stares at the ceiling and wonders if this is what opportunity feels like. Excitement twisted with fear. He replays that moment in Harajuku, the handshake, the card, the decision to say yes. Every path starts with a choice, and choices demand courage. He realizes that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's walking through it. So he decides to continue. The boy who once blended into the background begins to move differently, not with arrogance, but with purpose. He starts attending auditions. Most end in rejection. Doors close before he even finishes a line. But every no leaves a mark, shaping him, hardening resolve into rhythm. He learns that disappointment, too, can be a kind of teacher. One day, after another failed audition, he sits in a cafe, staring at the steam rising from his cup. Around him, the city hums with life, relentless, beautiful, indifferent. He watches people chase trains, chase deadlines, chase dreams. And something clicks. He realizes he's been measuring himself against others who shout louder, shine brighter. But maybe his gift isn't to shout. Maybe it's to listen, to observe what others miss, to feel what others ignore. It's in that moment he makes a quiet promise to himself. If I'm going to do this, I'll do it my way, with silence, with depth, with truth. That promise will follow him for years, through fame, through failure, through everything that comes next. As the months pass, his work picks up. Magazines begin to call. Brands take notice. The boy who once questioned his worth now stands in front of cameras with calm confidence. But inside, he stays grounded, still that kid from the soccer field, still unsure where this path leads. He starts noticing something else, how people react when he simply is. When he doesn't overact, doesn't force a smile, doesn't hide behind persona. The camera, he learns, doesn't love perfection, it loves presence. He begins to master the art of doing less and meaning more. It's this philosophy that will later define his acting, the restraint, the pauses, the emotional control. What others see as minimalism is actually mastery, the ability to convey entire storms with one glance. Years later, when journalists ask about his beginnings, Kento smiles softly and says, "I was just walking home from soccer." But behind that simple sentence lies everything: the courage to say yes, the humility to learn, and the patience to wait for the right moment. Harajuku didn't give him fame. It gave him direction. That single encounter proved that fate doesn't always roar in thunder. Sometimes, it whispers in the middle of a crowded street. The story of Kento Yamazaki begins with a coincidence that wasn't coincidence at all. It begins with a boy who didn't believe he was special, until the world reflected back the truth he couldn't yet see. He didn't know it then, but that quiet encounter would awaken a calling much louder than modeling. A desire to express, to create, to feel. Because every great story begins with a moment that seems small, until it isn't. And for Kento Yamazaki, that moment was the day he stopped being invisible. But destiny wasn't done with him yet. The next test would come not from the streets, but from behind closed doors, where ambition and doubt would battle for his soul. Chapter 2: Dreams Behind Closed Doors. The sound of the door clicking shut feels louder than it should. It's late. Tokyo hums outside, trains clatter, neon signs buzz. But inside Kento Yamazaki's small room, there's only silence. On the desk lies a camera, a script, and a mountain of self-doubt. By day, he's still a student, ordinary uniform, ordinary smile, the boy who sits quietly at the back of class. By night, he's something else entirely, a secret dreamer, rehearsing lines into the reflection of a dark window. He hides this part of himself because he doesn't yet know how to explain it. He tells no one at school about his auditions or his magazine shoots. His classmates talk about college entrance exams, not casting calls. If they knew he was chasing a dream this uncertain, they'd call it naive, or worse, arrogant. So he keeps his ambition behind closed doors. It's a strange double life. In class, he copies notes, nods when called, and disappears into routine. After school, he rides the train across the city, trading textbooks for scripts. At modeling shoots, he learns to stand tall under lights that feel like interrogation lamps. At home, he whispers lines when the house is asleep, words from stories no one else knows he's practicing. He doesn't realize it, but this secret discipline, this hidden repetition, is shaping him into something rare, an artist who grows in silence. The world sees only the result. But what truly builds him are these invisible nights of effort, hours no camera will ever capture. There are moments, though, when doubt claws at his focus. He wonders if he's wasting time, if these dreams are just vanity dressed as purpose. He sees the exhaustion in his parents' faces, the quiet worry they try not to show. They don't discourage him, but they don't encourage him either. They simply hope this phase will pass before disappointment crushes him. And yet, every time he thinks about quitting, he remembers that first spark in Harajuku, the moment when a stranger saw potential where he saw nothing. He clings to that memory like an anchor. If someone could see something in me once, maybe it's still there. That thought keeps him going. Kento learns to balance contradictions. The humility of the classroom versus the ambition of the studio. The stillness of homework versus the chaos of cameras. It's a fragile balance, and sometimes it breaks. He fails tests because of sleepless nights. He misses auditions because of school. He misses classes because of auditions. Every choice feels like betrayal of someone or something. And yet, he chooses to keep trying. Because even if the world doesn't understand his dream, the dream understands him. One evening, while riding the Yamanote line home, he watches his reflection in the train window. The city flickers behind his ghostly image. Buildings, lights, strangers. He looks at himself and barely recognizes the person he's becoming. Not a celebrity, not a model, but a work in progress. That's when he realizes, becoming isn't glamorous. It's lonely. It's silent. It happens in rooms no one sees, through doubts no one claps for. He whispers under his breath, "I'll earn the right to be seen, but first I'll learn in the dark." That vow becomes his quiet philosophy. His friends start to notice subtle changes. He's more withdrawn, more focused. They tease him for being serious, unaware of the battles he's fighting silently. Sometimes he laughs it off. Other times, he wonders what it would feel like to be understood, to tell someone what it's like to stand in front of a camera, pretending to be confident while your heart races like it's trying to escape. But he doesn't tell them. Not yet. Some dreams are too fragile to expose before they're ready. Then comes a moment of crisis. A casting director tells him bluntly, "You're good-looking, but you don't stand out. You need presence." The words sting more than rejection. What does presence even mean? Isn't he showing up? Isn't that enough? That night, he doesn't practice lines. He just sits on the floor, staring at the city lights outside his window. The glow feels far away, unreachable, like a different world. But then something shifts inside him. He realizes presence isn't about volume. It's about intention. It's not the voice that matters. It's the truth behind it. He begins to study human behavior, not in acting classes, but in life. He watches how people express emotion through stillness, how silence can say more than words. At train stations, he observes strangers, how they wait, how they breathe, how they carry sadness quietly. He begins to feel stories instead of performing them. That's when something extraordinary begins to awaken: emotional precision. The ability to express without exaggeration. The power of understatement, a trait that will later define his style. Weeks later, at another small audition, he performs a short scene, simple, understated, honest. When he finishes, the room is quiet. No applause. No visible reaction. But one casting director leans forward and says softly, "You didn't act, you existed." He doesn't fully understand what that means yet. But walking home that day, he feels lighter. For the first time, he realizes he doesn't need to become someone else to be seen. He just needs to be fully himself. That realization becomes the foundation of everything that follows. By the end of high school, Kento is juggling dreams and reality like two fragile orbits. He still hasn't made it big. There are no awards, no headlines, no guarantees. But he's building something deeper than fame, discipline. He wakes early, trains his expression in the mirror, memorizes lines between train stops. When others sleep, he rewatches old films, studying emotion, timing, silence. He's not just preparing for opportunity, he's preparing for transformation. Every private effort becomes a brick in the invisible structure of his future. And so, behind closed doors, Kento Yamazaki becomes something rare, a student of his own potential. He learns that greatness often grows in secrecy, in spaces where no one claps. He learns that ambition doesn't need to be loud to be real. He learns that humility is not weakness, it's focus. Years later, he'll look back on these nights as sacred, The quiet hours when he built the foundation for everything to come. Because the truth is this: fame is born in public, but mastery is born in private. He doesn't know it yet, but his next challenge will come under harsh lights and sharper expectations. The auditions will multiply, the pressure will rise, and the fear of being forgettable will return to test him once again. Chapter 3: The Awkward Camera. The room smells like dust and nerves. A single light shines over the backdrop, bright enough to expose every hesitation, every tremor in his breath. The casting director taps a pen against the clipboard. "Whenever you're ready," she says. Kento Yamazaki stands frozen. His script shakes slightly in his hand. The camera stares at him, unblinking, merciless. It's his third audition this week. The other two ended in polite smiles and silent rejection. He's starting to memorize that look, the thank you, next expression that tells you you've already lost before you finish your line. He takes a deep breath. The air feels heavy. He looks into the lens, searching for the version of himself he rehearsed in his bedroom. The confident one. The one who belonged here. But the moment he opens his mouth, the words fall flat. His tone cracks halfway through the scene. His eyes dart nervously toward the camera operator. The silence afterward is unbearable. "Thank you," the director says without emotion. It's the kind of thank you that means goodbye. He bows, forces a small smile, and leaves the room. Outside, the hallway feels colder. Every step echoes like a question. Am I really good enough for this? That night, he walks the streets of Shibuya alone. Neon lights blur through the drizzle. Couples laugh under umbrellas. His reflection in a shop window looks like a stranger, someone trying to play a role he doesn't understand. He replays the audition in his mind over and over, dissecting every breath, every gesture, every mistake. The embarrassment burns in his chest. He hates how small he felt under that light. How mechanical his words sounded. He thought talent alone would open doors. But now, standing under the rain, he realizes talent means nothing if you can't be seen. And visibility, he's learning, is an art of its own. The next week, he attends another audition, smaller, quieter, just a few people in the room. He tells himself this one will be different. But as the red light on the camera turns on, something happens again. His voice shrinks. The scene becomes performance, not truth. He's acting for approval, not from emotion. The casting agent tilts her head. "Can you try it again? But less." Less? He doesn't know what that means. He performs again, this time with smaller gestures, a steadier voice. When he finishes, there's a pause. Then she says softly, "Better. But don't act next time. Just be." He writes those words in a notebook that night. Just be. They sound simple, but they haunt him for years. Every rejection becomes a mirror. And every mirror shows him the same truth. Confidence can't be faked. He starts practicing not in front of cameras, but in front of silence. He sits at home, lights off, eyes closed, and imagines scenes, not to perform but to feel them. He studies how emotion rises naturally before words even exist. He begins to understand that acting isn't imitation, it's remembering. Remembering how it feels to be human, raw and unpolished. This is the moment his craft begins to take shape. Not through applause, but through awareness. Months pass. He keeps failing auditions, but the failures start to feel different. They sting, but they teach. They humble him, but they don't break him. He realizes that each no is a rehearsal for a stronger yes. He starts reading about other actors who began the same way: Takuya Kimura, Ken Watanabe, even international figures who once froze in front of cameras just like him. He finds comfort in their imperfections. If they could turn awkwardness into art, maybe he can too. And slowly, quietly, something shifts. At his next audition, Kento enters the room differently. He doesn't rush to speak. He doesn't force confidence. He just breathes. He looks at the camera, not as a threat, but as a partner. He imagines the lens as a person he's speaking to, not performing for. The room feels smaller, warmer, real. When he finishes the scene, the casting assistant lowers her pen. There's a flicker of surprise in her expression. It's not perfection, but it's truth. For the first time, he feels it too. Not applause, not validation, but connection. That night, on the train home, he doesn't think about winning or losing. He just stares out the window and smiles faintly. He realizes the fear hasn't disappeared. He's just learned to make peace with it. Because courage, he discovers, isn't performing without fear. It's performing with fear and still choosing to show up. Weeks later, he gets a small callback. A minor role in a low-budget TV series. Barely 2 lines. But for him, it's everything. He stands in front of the mirror the night before filming, repeating the lines softly. No overacting. No bravado. Just truth. He thinks of the kid who used to stumble in front of the camera, the one who tried to force charisma he didn't yet believe in. Now, he feels something new, stillness. It's quiet, confident, unshakable. On set, when the director calls action, time slows. Kento delivers his lines simply, with no theatrics, no artifice. For a moment, everyone is silent. The director lowers his hand and nods. No big reaction. No praise. Just a quiet approval that says, that's real. It's the smallest scene of his career, but it feels like a rebirth. He walks off set with a certainty that he's found his way through the awkwardness. Not by pretending to be someone else, but by finally allowing himself to exist fully in the present moment. From then on, the camera is no longer an enemy. It's a witness. It captures not just how he looks, but who he is becoming. He begins to embrace imperfection, the stutters, the hesitations, the micro-expressions that reveal truth. He learns that emotion doesn't live in words, but in the silence between them. The awkward boy in front of the camera is gone. What remains is an artist in formation, someone learning to speak fluently in the language of vulnerability. Years later, when interviewers ask him about his early career, he laughs quietly and says, "I used to fear the red light on the camera. Now, I see it as a heartbeat." That heartbeat became the rhythm of his art, the pulse of presence that made audiences believe him even when he said nothing at all. The awkwardness wasn't failure. It was transformation in disguise. But this transformation was only the beginning. The next challenge would come when he finally stepped into a real production, his first frame in the world of television. A moment that would turn curiosity into conviction. Chapter 4. The First Frame. The set is alive with chaos. Cables snake across the floor, lights hum overhead, assistants shout directions. To an outsider, it looks like confusion. To Kento Yamazaki, it feels like destiny finally giving him an address. He stands just beyond the reach of the lights, clutching a script that barely has his name on it. 2 lines. 1 brief appearance. But to him, it's not small. It's first. The assistant director waves him over. "You're up." His pulse quickens. He takes one careful step into the glow of the spotlight, where the air feels heavier, thicker with expectation. The camera rolls. And for the first time in his life, Kento feels the weight of being seen not as a student, not as a model, but as an actor. Every sound fades, the whispers, the crew chatter, the hum of machines, until only his breath remains. Action. He says his lines quietly, naturally, almost without thinking. There's no performance. Just presence. The scene lasts 15 seconds. Cut. Silence. Then, a soft nod from the director. That's it. His first frame, captured forever. Later, as he sits alone outside the studio, the night sky feels different. He's been in front of cameras before, but this one was different. Modeling was about image. Acting, he realizes, is about truth. That night, he can't sleep. Not because of excitement, but because of understanding. For the first time, he knows what he wants. He doesn't crave fame or applause. He craves meaning. Over the following months, he takes whatever small parts he can find. 1 episode cameos. Supporting roles that fade before the credits roll. But each one teaches him something new. He studies the veterans on set, the way they breathe before speaking, the way they let silence carry emotion. He realizes that acting isn't about pretending, it's about surrendering to the moment. Between takes, he stays quiet, absorbing everything. While others chat, he observes lighting setups, listens to how directors shape tone, how editors think in frames. He's not just working, he's studying cinema itself. His quiet nature, once mistaken for shyness, becomes his secret weapon. While others rush to perform, he learns to listen. But the learning curve is steep. There are days when the camera feels like a judge, not an ally. Days when his nerves steal his voice. He stumbles through takes, loses timing, forgets lines. The crew is patient, but he can feel their doubt. He knows he's replaceable. He knows one mistake could close the door he just opened. One afternoon, after blowing a simple scene, he apologizes repeatedly to the assistant director. The man shrugs. Don't apologize. Just believe. Those 3 words carve themselves into his memory. Believe. After that, something changes. Kento begins to anchor every scene in emotion instead of logic. He stops worrying about how he looks and focuses on what he feels. During one rehearsal, the director asks him to repeat a line, not louder but truer. Kento closes his eyes, takes a breath, and thinks of his father, of distance, silence, love unspoken. When he delivers the line again, it's electric. The director says nothing. He just moves on. And that, Kento learns, is the highest compliment, when silence means you did it right. As projects come and go, his name begins to circulate quietly through the industry. He's the one who listens. He's calm under pressure. He feels real. He doesn't chase the spotlight, he lets it find him naturally. He still takes the train home after filming, blending into crowds, carrying a lunchbox instead of an ego. There's beauty in that anonymity, the ability to walk among people who don't yet know who you are, but one day will. Then comes a turning point. He's offered a supporting role in a new drama, one with real exposure, one that could define his trajectory. The script lands in his hands, and he feels the gravity of it. For the first time, he's not just a background character. He's part of the story. But with opportunity comes pressure. He spends nights pacing, rehearsing, doubting. What if he fails on a bigger stage? He reopens that notebook from his early days. On the first page, 3 words stare back at him: just be. That becomes his mantra again. On the first day of filming, nerves creep in. But this time, he welcomes them. He remembers the rain-soaked streets of Shibuya, the rejections, the awkward cameras, the loneliness. He carries them all like armor. When the camera rolls, something extraordinary happens. He disappears. The boy, the fear, the self-consciousness, all fade. What's left is truth. He delivers his lines with quiet conviction, his eyes carrying more emotion than his voice. When the director calls cut, the crew remains still for a moment, the kind of silence that follows impact. That day, something shifts permanently. He's no longer pretending to be an actor. He is one. After the shoot, he walks home under the city lights. He thinks about the path that brought him here, the coincidences, the failures, the sleepless nights. He realizes every awkward audition, every hidden rehearsal, every quiet moment behind closed doors led him here, to this frame. The first frame that matters. He looks up at the glowing signs and feels a strange peace. He doesn't know where this journey leads, but he knows he's finally walking the right road. Months later, when the show airs, his scene lasts less than a minute. But fans notice him. Messages appear online, short, curious comments. Who's that actor? There's something about his eyes. They don't know his name yet, but they remember the feeling he left behind. And that's when Kento understands the real power of cinema. It's not about screen time, it's about emotional afterglow. You can appear for 30 seconds and live forever in someone's memory. In interviews years later, he'll smile modestly when asked about that first frame. It was just a small role, he'll say. But those who know, know. It wasn't small, it was ignition. Every story begins with a single image that defines everything that follows. And for Kento Yamazaki, It was the moment he realized that stillness can speak louder than any line. But the journey was far from over. The more success he found, the more shadows it cast. Fame would soon arrive, and with it, the temptation to become what others expected, instead of who he truly was. Chapter 5. Between Spotlight and Shadow. The premiere lights look beautiful from far away. They float above the carpet like tame stars, warm and flattering, promising the same thing they've promised to 1,000 faces before: be bright, and we will love you. Kento Yamazaki steps into that glow with a careful breath. Cameras awaken. Shutters clatter like rain. His name is called from 3 directions at once. He smiles, not too wide, not too long, and turns his face so the angle is kind to the moment. This is craft, too. Not acting, but surviving the ritual of being seen. For a second, he lets the warmth soak in. The applause, the familiarity, the murmurs of "that's him." Then the questions begin. Who are you dating? Is it true you turned down that role? Are you Japan's next heartthrob? The light is still warm, but the temperature of the room changes. He feels the question behind all the questions. Will you become what we want you to be? He answers politely, as he always does. The boy from Harajuku lives in his posture, measured, respectful, grateful. But as he walks past the last camera and the carpet ends, something tugs at his ribs like a warning. Fame is not a room you enter, it's a mirror you must carry. And mirrors, he is learning, can cut. The weeks after the premiere are a blur: interviews, features, new scripts. His phone is louder than it's ever been. Friends notice how hard it is to make plans with him. His mother asks softly if he's eating enough. His manager texts at midnight: early call tomorrow. New meeting added. The attention is flattering. It is also dangerous, because attention can seduce you into becoming a simplified version of yourself. A marketable mask. Auditions change, too. Directors speak to him differently now. The notes come with a smile and a box. Lean into the charm, more gaze. You're the guy who doesn't need to try. The words sound like compliments. To him, they feel like handcuffs. Because inside, there is an artist making a different promise. To be honest, not easy. To chase emotion, not applause. And those vows do not always sell. He takes home the scripts and reads them late, alone, at a kitchen table that still wobbles on one leg. The patterns are clear. Pretty boy saves the scene. Pretty boy learns a small lesson. Pretty boy smiles at the end. He closes the last page and stares at the wall. Is this the future, or a trap? He begins to notice a new kind of exhaustion. Not physical, that can be solved with sleep. This is moral fatigue, the ache that comes from pretending to be less than you are. On set one afternoon, a stylist jokes, "You don't even have to act, Kento-kun. Just stand there." Everyone laughs. He laughs too. But the line follows him into the car, into the elevator, into his room, where it spreads across the ceiling like a slow stain. He didn't come here to stand there. He came to feel and make others feel. That night he writes in his notebook, the one that has guided him since the beginning. Between spotlight and shadow, choose truth. He underlines it twice. The next morning he makes a decision some will call reckless. He declines an easy high-visibility role, the sort that inflates numbers and crushes souls. His manager is kind but worried. "Are you sure? This is a strong lane for you." Kento nods. "I want something that hurts a little," he says. "Something that scares me." He doesn't mean controversy. He means depth. The kind of story that leaves marks under the skin. For a few weeks, the phone quiets. The world doesn't punish him exactly. It just forgets a little. Algorithms turn their faces. He sits with the silence like an old friend and listens. Silence tells him what noise refuses to, what he wants, and what he doesn't. The next offer is not glamorous. The budget is smaller. The role is complicated, a young man whose beauty only makes his pain easier to dismiss. The director says, "I don't need you to be handsome. I need you to be haunted." Kento feels the old door unlock inside his chest. "Haunted," he repeats. "I can try." On set, He strips the role of decoration. He keeps the hair plain, the wardrobe unremarkable. He asks for fewer close-ups. He wants the audience to listen to the heartbeat of the scene, not the surface of his face. In the pivotal moment, his character hears a truth that unravels him. The line is short. The silence is long. Under the lights, he does the hardest thing he knows how to do: nothing. He lets the ache arrive without choreography. His eyes fill, not with tears, but with weight. The director doesn't call cut for 3 extra seconds. Everyone on set holds breath they didn't know they were holding. When the scene ends, nobody applauds. They just look down, as if a prayer has finished. Kento steps outside and leans against the studio wall. The sky is an ordinary blue. The air smells like sawdust and coffee. He feels clean. This is what he was protecting, the work that requires him to be a person first and a product never. But the spotlight, like the tide, always returns. Reviews mention unexpected depth. Offers get stranger, some bolder, some lazier. A magazine asks for a shoot themed around perfect youth. He says yes to the interview and no to the theme. Let's talk about failure, he suggests. The editor blinks, then smiles slowly. Let's. They speak about auditions where his voice shook, the role he turned down, the night he almost quit because rejection felt like concrete in his lungs. The article runs under a headline he didn't choose but can live with: the quiet weapon. In the photos, the light is softer. The eyes are not posed. The comments are divided. Some ask for more fashion. Others say they've never felt closer to him. He reads both, then reads neither. Approval is not a compass. Truth is. One evening, he returns to Harajuku and walks the same street where a stranger once handed him a card. The shops are different. The rhythm is not. He stops at an intersection and watches a new boy, shoulders hunched, eyes curious, pass by holding a soccer ball. Kento smiles without being seen. He whispers, "It's your turn when you say it is." He realizes something essential. The shadow beside the spotlight isn't the enemy. It's the refuge. The place you go to remember why you stepped into light at all. He begins to build practices that keep him whole. Fewer public events. More reading. Long walks without headphones. He learns to say no with grace, yes with caution, and maybe with a promise to think. He starts choosing scenes the way a craftsman chooses tools, for what they can carve, not for how they shine. At a press conference, a reporter asks a barbed question dressed as a compliment. Do you worry that your looks are the only reason your roles work? The room shifts in its chair. Kento doesn't flinch. He lets the silence stand between them like a held breath, then answers gently, looks open doors. Truth keeps you in the room. It isn't a clapback. It's a thesis. And it follows him. Because beneath the headlines and the screens and the 1,000 captured moments, his real work is simple and relentless. To return again and again, to the vulnerable center where acting isn't a trick but an invitation. To feel. To let others feel. Every silence, every doubt, becomes part of his fire. There will be bigger sets, louder fame, harsher judgments. But tonight, he sits at that wobbling table again, a script open, a pen uncapped, the city murmuring through the window. He draws a small line under a difficult paragraph and writes in the margin, "Less beauty, more truth." He closes his eyes and sees 2 rooms, one full of light, the other a calm dusk. He understands now that he needs both. The spotlight to reach people, the shadow to stay himself. He breathes in, breathes out. The decision is made. He thinks the worst of the conflict is behind him. He's wrong, and lucky. Because the next role will demand more empathy, more patience, and more courage than any mirror ever could. Chapter 6, Your Lie in April. The first time Kento Yamazaki hears the piano piece, it doesn't sound like music. It sounds like memory, sharp, fragile, unfinished. He sits in a quiet rehearsal room, script in hand, as the melody drifts from a small speaker on the floor. The notes rise, stumble, and fall again, as if the piano itself is grieving. The director's voice cuts through the echo. This story isn't about playing perfectly. It's about feeling the mistake. Kento nods, though he's not sure he understands yet. He's been cast in a live-action adaptation of Your Lie in April, a film about love, loss, and the courage to perform again after heartbreak. It's his first leading role where the emotions are heavier than the lines. The pressure feels immense. He spends hours at the piano, not to master it, but to understand it. The keys are cold, unyielding at first. His fingers stumble, his timing breaks. Every wrong note becomes a reminder that perfection was never the point. He studies the script like a confession. A boy haunted by his mother's death. A genius paralyzed by memory. A love that teaches him to breathe again. The story terrifies him. Because beneath the fiction, he recognizes something painfully familiar. That quiet fear of never being enough, of letting grief define you. There are nights he closes the piano lid and just sits there, staring at the reflection in the glossy surface. He doesn't see a movie star. He sees himself, the boy from Harajuku, still pretending he belongs here. And that's when he realizes something crucial. He can't act this role. He has to feel it. Filming begins in winter. The set smells of rain and old wood. In one scene, his character plays a song for the girl who changed his life, the same piece he's been practicing for weeks. The camera rolls. The room is silent except for the trembling notes. Halfway through, his fingers falter. He hits the wrong key. Someone whispers cut, but the director raises a hand. "Keep going," he says quietly. Kento doesn't stop. He keeps playing, eyes closed, tears building from a place he didn't plan to visit. He's not acting anymore. He's remembering. When the last note fades, the crew stays silent. The director walks over, places a hand on his shoulder, and says, "That was truth." For days after that scene, he can't shake the feeling that something inside him cracked open. He walks the streets of Tokyo in a kind of daze, seeing color where he used to see gray. Every sound, footsteps, laughter, train wheels, feels musical, like life itself is composing again. He realizes the role isn't just about loss. It's about learning to play again after silence. To move forward when the heart insists on staying behind. The film becomes his emotional baptism, the point where craft and catharsis merge. He begins to understand what empathy really means, not imagining someone's pain, but remembering your own through them. When Your Lie in April premieres, critics talk about how real his eyes look in the final scene, how the tears don't feel rehearsed. They weren't. Audiences write to him online. "I cried with you," one says. Another writes, "I didn't know boys could show emotion like that." He doesn't reply, but he reads them all. Because each message confirms something he's begun to believe. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's transmission. It's how truth travels between strangers. The success of the film brings new attention, magazine covers, interviews, photo shoots, but Kento feels detached from the glamour. He's grateful, yes. But part of him remains with that piano, in that silent room where the wrong note became the right moment. He keeps a metronome on his desk now. Not to practice, but as a reminder, rhythm is not about speed. It's about presence. He starts applying that rhythm to everything. How he speaks, how he chooses roles, how he moves through fame. The pace slows. The purpose sharpens. He learns that real art doesn't scream for attention. It whispers to those who listen. One evening, he visits a small local concert. A young pianist performs the same piece from the film, trembling, imperfect, beautiful. After the show, she spots him in the crowd and gasps. "I played it because of your movie," she says shyly. Kento smiles. "You played it better," he replies. She shakes her head. "No, you made it real." He bows gently, humbled. That's when he realizes the story has completed its circle. What once healed him is now healing others. And maybe that's what performance truly is, the act of passing light forward. Months later, during a quiet interview, a journalist asks, "What did Your Lie in April teach you?" Kento thinks for a long moment before answering. That emotion doesn't belong to actors. It belongs to everyone who has ever lost something and still chose to try again. The journalist nods, writes the quote down, and says softly, "That's beautiful." Kento smiles faintly. "It's not beautiful," he replies. "It's honest." Behind the calm exterior, he's still processing what that role gave him and what it took. It left him raw, open, aware of how fragile sincerity can be in a world obsessed with control. But it also anchored him in something real. He begins to trust silence again, not as emptiness, but as proof that the heart is still listening. He doesn't rush into his next project. Instead, he rests, reflects, and learns to play life itself with the same patience he gave to the piano. When people ask him about success, he doesn't mention awards or numbers. He talks about that one take, the one where he hit the wrong note and kept going. Because in that moment, he found the essence of his art. You don't reach truth by chasing perfection. You reach it by surrendering to imperfection, by staying human when it's easiest to hide. Years later, when new actors ask him for advice, he tells them softly, "Don't perform pain. Remember it. Let it breathe." And they nod, though they may not understand yet. They will. Someday. When their own music falters and they keep playing anyway. That film changed him. Not because it made him famous, but because it made him feel alive. And for the rest of his career, whenever a director shouts action, he'll hear a quieter voice underneath, a piano note lingering from long ago whispering, "Play with honesty, even when it hurts." He doesn't know it yet, but his next role will bring a new kind of pressure, not from emotion, but from adoration. The world will begin to fall in love with him, and he'll have to learn that too much love can become a cage. Chapter 7: Orange and the Weight of Expectation. Before the cameras, before the posters, before the chorus of voices shouting his name, there is a single quiet morning. Kento Yamazaki sits by a window the color of late citrus. Dawn rinses Tokyo in pale amber. On the table, a folded script, a cooling cup of tea, and a small stack of handwritten letters tied with a ribbon the color of autumn leaves. He unties the bow and begins to read. "Your performance helped me forgive someone. I cried with my best friend. We're okay now. I didn't know boys could be gentle." The words are so soft they feel heavier than applause. He closes his eyes and breathes. This is what Orange has given him, not just recognition, but responsibility. He doesn't know it yet, but love, even the pure kind, has a gravity of its own. The set of Orange does not roar, it hums. A schoolyard, a train platform, a hill where teenagers rehearse the courage to say the right thing before it's too late. Kento's character lives in the delicate weather of regret and hope, a climate teens know too well. To play him truthfully, Kento strips the performance of decoration. Every smile must carry weight. Every silence must be a door. On the hill scene, wind presses the grass flat like a hand smoothing a page. The camera waits. He looks at his friend, not with melodrama, but with that quiet urgency that lives in the throat when you still have time to change a future. The line is simple. The feeling is not. He lets the ache speak before words do. "Cut," the director says gently, as if waking someone from a dream. No one claps. They just exhale. When Orange reaches theaters, something unusual happens. Teenagers arrive in groups, then return alone. Friends bring friends. Parents come, then pretend they didn't cry. Online, screenshots multiply like fireflies, scenes shared with captions that read like confessions. The story isn't an escape, it's a mirror. And in that mirror, a label begins to etch itself beside Kento's name, Heartthrob. He understands the warmth behind the word. He also hears the door it can lock. Because a label, even a loving one, is a map with only one road. The interviews begin to bend. How does it feel to be Japan's next heartthrob? What's your secret to looking this gentle? Do you prefer romantic roles? The questions are polite cages. He answers with care, always grateful, never dismissive. But somewhere between the flash and the smile, he feels the gravity increasing, the invisible demand to repeat a feeling until it becomes a formula. At a magazine shoot, a stylist suggests a certain perfect softness, a sweater that says harmless, a gaze that says save me. He tries it once and sees the photograph, beautifully empty, a nice face without a pulse. He sets the sweater aside. I'd rather show a bruise than a gloss, he says, gently. They blink. He smiles. The point lands without a fight. The fan mail becomes tidal. Gifts, drawings, folded paper cranes. In the envelopes, he recognizes the voice he once had, the need to be seen without being simplified. He writes back when he can, not with public posts, but with private notes, short and sincere. He knows that for some, the character was the bridge. But he also knows bridges can turn into borders if you never cross them. One night, at a small cafe, a girl approaches the table and bows. "Your movie helped me say sorry," she whispers. Her hands shake. He thanks her and bows lower. "The movie reminded me to say it too," he replies. They both laugh, surprised by the truth. This is the paradox. The more he becomes a symbol, the more he must protect the human underneath. Expectations grow louder in places where he once felt invisible. On set, in meetings, between takes. More charm. More softness. Stay in the lane. But lanes are for traffic, not for souls. He begins to curate his yes and his no with the precision of a surgeon. No to roles that love his surface. Yes to roles that touch his nerve. His manager worries about momentum. Kento worries about meaning. Usually, momentum wins. This time, meaning does. He isn't rebelling, he's refining. He isn't rejecting his audience, he's rejecting a version of himself that would please them at the cost of truth. Because every silence, every doubt, must become part of his fire, not the water that puts it out. On a Sunday, he returns to the hill where they filmed. The crew is gone, the grass has already forgotten the tripods. He sits on the slope and watches two boys throw a baseball back and forth, missing as often as they catch. Their laughter pinches the sky brighter. He realizes the secret of Orange wasn't romance, it was repair. The courage to send a message back to a younger self. Do it differently, do it now. He whispers a message of his own into the wind. Don't trade your depth for my comfort. It's not addressed to the audience. It's addressed to the future executives who will try to make him smaller. The media cycle turns a shade sharper. Photos of him smiling beside co-stars become headlines with invented stories. He reads none of them, but friends do, and the summaries arrive uninvited. He answers each with the same sentence, "I'm fine." Some days, it is true. At a press junket, a reporter asks if he worries his image is too gentle to be taken seriously. He lets the question breathe, then nods. "I worry when I'm not taken seriously by myself," he says. Gentle doesn't mean light. It means controlled. The room writes it down. He didn't plan the line. It was simply there, waiting. He keeps a small ritual to stay sane. After a premiere, after the noise, he walks alone for 20 minutes without a phone. No music. No destination. He lets the adrenaline burn out of his chest and return to the city that made him. Neon sharpens, footsteps slow, and he remembers the first camera, the first line, the first frame that said "Stay human." One such night, he passes a theater where Orange is still playing. As he stands outside, a group of friends bursts through the doors, eyes red, arguing gently about a scene. One of them sees him and freezes, then doesn't approach. Instead, she just bows from the curb, a private thank you in a public place. He returns the bow with a gratitude that hurts. He didn't know it then, but this is the moment he chooses the shape of his future. He will accept love as fuel, not as leash. There is a cost to this choice. Some offers fall away. Some partnerships cool. But other doors open, quieter, stronger ones. A director known for making actors bleed on camera calls his manager. "I want the boy who whispers like a storm," he says. Kento reads the script that night. It is not a romance. It is not a comfort. It is a path through a darker room. He sleeps well for the first time in weeks. When people say Orange made him a star, he nods and lets them be right in their way. The truth he carries is different. Orange didn't make him shine. It taught him how to absorb light without becoming hollow. It taught him that a crowd's love, while beautiful, can also be a room with no windows, unless you insist on building one. And so he builds. He accepts the interviews but answers as a person, not a brand. He signs the posters, but keeps the hands that sign rooted to work that matters. He smiles on carpets, but refuses the costume of perfection. He lets the adoration pass through him without deciding who he is. Because adoration that decides for you is not love. It is gravity. And gravity without wings is a fall. The letters still arrive. He keeps them tied in their ribbon, a living proof that stories can rescue people from edges we can't see. On difficult days, he reads one. On good days, he reads none, to remind himself that he is not a result, he is a practice. He didn't know it then, but Orange taught him the lesson he would need most for the years ahead. Tenderness requires strength. Boundaries are a form of care, and the truest fans will follow you when you leave the easy lane. He believes the weight has balanced at last, that he can carry expectation without losing shape. But the machine has other plans. The adaptations will multiply, the labels will thicken, and the next chapter will test whether he can turn a box into a doorway. Chapter 8. The Manga Burden. The applause had barely faded before the next scripts arrived. Each one wrapped in the same promise, adapted from the best-selling manga. Action, romance, tragedy, different stories, same pattern, printed expectations already drawn before the first scene was filmed. Kento Yamazaki stared at the stack on his desk. Dozens of pages, and yet they all felt like mirrors reflecting the same face. He was becoming the living embodiment of manga adaptations, the safe choice, the reliable hero, the beautiful cipher. At first, it was flattering. Then it became suffocating. Fans loved him in these roles, the noble swordsman, the tragic genius, the silent savior. But as his fame grew, so did a quiet ache inside him. He began to feel like a translation of himself. A drawing brought to life, accurate, admired, but not alive. During interviews, journalists asked about the new project before finishing the question. Another manga? He would smile politely and say, yes, another opportunity to bring a story to life. But inside, a different answer echoed, another repetition. Another version of me that isn't mine. Every actor fears the box, the invisible shape that audiences build around them. Kento's box was drawn in ink and sold in millions. Every time a director said, let's stay close to the original, another wall went up. He tried to find freedom inside those walls, adding humanity where the panels left blank space. A glance that lingered longer than the script demanded. A hesitation that made a hero seem unsure. Small rebellions disguised as performance. But rebellion has limits when the world demands a copy. One night, after a press event for yet another adaptation, he sits in his apartment surrounded by posters of himself. Every one of them looks perfect. Every one of them feels hollow. He whispers to the reflection in the glass window. You're getting better at pretending to be other people, and worse at being yourself. It's not self-pity. It's diagnosis. The boy who once found freedom in stillness now feels trapped in applause. The roles that once challenged him now define him. And the silence that used to bring clarity now feels like static. The next project, Death Note, is supposed to change everything. A global title, a darker tone, a chance to prove range. He plays L, the eccentric detective who unravels a moral labyrinth. On paper, it's a breakthrough. In practice, it's a storm. The fandom divides. Purists complain that no live actor can capture the original's genius. Others praise his interpretation. But for Kento, the noise isn't the problem. It's the realization that he is now caught in something larger than art, expectation at scale. He studies the online debates at first, then stops. Because every word, good or bad, begins to rewrite how he sees himself. Fame, he learns, is a dialogue where you're not allowed to answer honestly. During a night shoot, between takes, he sits on the edge of a rooftop set. The skyline stretches endlessly, dotted with lights like judgmental stars. He wonders if the real challenge of acting is not transformation, but containment. Containing the noise, the projection, the myth. A crew member sits beside him and says, "You look tired." Kento smiles. "That's good. So does my character." The man laughs, not realizing it wasn't a joke. After Death Note, offers multiply. but the scripts start to blur. He reads the same hero in a different costume, the same emotion with new background music. The industry, it seems, has decided what works, and therefore what he should be. He accepts a few. He rejects others. But the ones he rejects haunt him, not because of lost fame, but because of what they reveal, that the machine doesn't see Kento Yamazaki. It sees Kento Yamazaki, the brand. He starts to withdraw between films. Less interviews. Fewer appearances. He chooses silence again, not as escape, but as rebellion. While others chase momentum, he looks for meaning. In that silence, he finds a new kind of honesty. He begins journaling daily, reflections on art, self, and the strange loneliness of being visible. He writes, "If they see only the surface, I must deepen it. If they paint me in ink, I must bleed in color." The words become a quiet manifesto. The next role he accepts is not glamorous. It's small, interior, uncomfortable. A story about imperfection, illness, and the parts of humanity that don't photograph well. During filming, he tells the director, "I want the audience to forget I'm handsome." The director laughs, thinking he's being modest. But Kento means it. He hides behind the role completely, not to disappear, but to finally be real. When the movie releases, critics are divided. Some call it too subdued. Others call it transformative. He calls it necessary. Because for the first time in years, he watches himself on screen and doesn't feel like a brand. He feels like a person telling the truth. The fame doesn't vanish. Fame never does. But it changes shape. The fan base matures. The questions evolve. "Why do you choose such quiet roles?" one reporter asks. He smiles and replies, "Because silence is honest." The room laughs. But the words stay. He learns to carry two weights now, the love of millions and the knowledge that it can crush him if he lets it. He stops asking how to escape expectation and starts asking how to transform it. He realizes that being typecast is only permanent if you stop growing. If they give you one instrument, you learn to play it in 1,000 ways. So he begins to reinvent from within. He studies directing. He learns lighting. He sketches storyboards. He doesn't want to fight the machine. He wants to understand it. And through that understanding, he begins to see a new kind of power, the ability to shape stories from the inside. One evening, while flipping through his old scripts, he finds one of his earliest photos from his modeling days, a glossy, frozen smile. He looks at it for a long moment, then places it in the trash. He doesn't do it with anger. He does it with peace. That image built him. But now, it's time to build himself. He realizes the burden of adaptation was never about manga. It was about identity. About the risk of becoming everyone except the one you were meant to be. He finally understands what it means to act freely. To step into every role not to impress, but to reveal. To accept that art is not escape, but excavation. He closes his journal that night with a new line. "If I must be drawn, let it be by my own hand." But this awakening will lead him to his darkest mirror yet, a role that will force him to explore the shadows of morality, power, and obsession. A role that will show him the price of intelligence without empathy. Chapter 9: Death Note and the Dark Mirror. Night on set tastes like electricity. Cables coil like veins, monitors glow with surgical cold, and somewhere beyond the lights sits a white porcelain plate stacked with sweets. A spoon clinks against china. The sound is delicate, precise, almost mathematical. Kento Yamazaki steps into frame in a hoodie and hunched posture, knees tucked into a chair not made for comfort but for concentration. Heavy shadows carve out his eyes. A strand of hair falls forward as he speaks, and the room tilts toward him the way gravity obeys a planet. He is L now. Not a hero, not a lover, not a stereotype. A mind with edges so sharp it cuts the air. Action. His voice is soft but lands like a scalpel. There is no wasted syllable. No warmth he doesn't intend. He picks up a cube of sugar as if it holds the weight of a confession, then lets it dissolve on his tongue, gaze never leaving the invisible chessboard inside his head. For Kento, this isn't mimicry. It's investigation. What does genius sound like when it whispers? How does empathy look when it rarely blinks? Playing L is a gamble with a loaded audience. They have already met him on the page. They know how he sits, eats, moves, thinks. They arrive with memories stronger than curiosity. Kento understands this. He doesn't try to outdraw the manga. He tries to breathe where the panels inhaled but never exhaled. In the early days of rehearsal, he strips the performance to bone. Fewer gestures, smaller breaths, thoughts that ripple before words do. He practices silence until it speaks. He catalogs microchoices: how to place a cup, how long to hold eye contact, how to make the verb observe feel like a moral position rather than a neutral act. Between takes, he asks the director not for bigger but for truer. "Let the camera come to me," he says quietly, "not the other way around." The backlash arrives on schedule, as predictable as Tide. Too human. Not human enough. Wrong angle, wrong sugar, wrong aura. He reads a little, then stops. Critics and fans are not the enemy. The real threat is distortion, the way outside voices can bend your compass if you hand it to them. So he builds a ritual before each major scene. 5 breaths, eyes down, palms open on his knees. With every exhale, he releases a version of the character that does not belong to him. With every inhale, he claims the one that does. When he surfaces, the room narrows to the lens and the truth. The rest is weather. One night, a scene calls for L to present a theory so bold it feels like violence. The line itself is short, the silence after is not. The camera closes in until there is nowhere left to hide. Kento does what he learned years ago in a different quiet room. He remembers instead of performs. He remembers the first auditions where his voice shook. He remembers the wrong piano note he didn't stop playing. He remembers the magazine cover that asked him to be soft when the role required steel. The memory doesn't make him angry. It makes him precise. He speaks the line without raising his voice. The set holds its breath. The director doesn't call cut for an extra heartbeat, as if the air itself needs time to adjust. L's mind is a cathedral of logic. His body is an afterthought. To make that visible, Kento starves the performance of vanity. The hoodie hangs, the posture collapses inward, the hands move like hypotheses. He gives the character the gift of inconvenience, angles that aren't flattering, choices that resist charm. He wants the audience to feel the friction of intelligence without the sugar of likability. But the deeper he goes, the colder the room becomes. After long days, he walks back to a hotel that feels like a white box with a bed. He showers in silence and sits at the desk, waiting for his pulse to drop. L does not sleep inside scenes only. He lingers in the margins, a shadow of relentless analysis looking for an exit. One evening he texts his manager, "After this, I need to do something human. Something warm." The reply is a thumbs up, then a question mark. There is no emoji that translates mercy. Fans begin to appear outside locations, eyes bright, phones lifted, hands shaking with devotion and debate. "Are you L?" a boy asks, half joking, fully sincere. Kento smiles. "Only for a little while," he answers. It's the truth and the boundary. In interviews, he refuses to defend or explain his version. He talks instead about the cost of intelligence without ethics. "If you see people as problems to solve," he says, "you stop seeing them." The reporter scribbles fast. The quote becomes a headline. It is not a provocation, it is a warning to himself. The grand confrontation scene arrives, a duel of hypotheses disguised as conversation. 2 minds circle, feint, and cut. The script is tightrope, the blocking is geometry, the emotion is ice. Before the take, Kento asks for a minute alone. He stands on his mark and lets the room blur. He imagines the world as a whiteboard covered in equations, every line connecting to a consequence. Then he erases a single variable, kindness. The whole system collapses into victory that tastes like ash. "Ready?" the director asks. He opens his eyes. "Ready." The camera rolls. He barely moves. When he does, it's deliberate, like a bishop sliding across a chessboard to end a game no one else noticed was already over. Cut. The crew exhales with the careful relief reserved for landing a plane. When the project releases, the noise roars at full volume. Trend lists, charts, hot takes. Some praise the restraint. Some prefer the ink. Kento thanks both and goes home. He has learned to celebrate the work, not the weather. But something essential has changed. Playing L taught him that technique without empathy can turn a performance into a puzzle no one wants to solve. Genius unmoored is cleverness. Precision without pulse is a perfect zero. He writes in his notebook that night, "Intelligence is a blade. Aim it at truth, or it will cut your heart." In the weeks that follow, he avoids roles that feel like mirrors reflecting mirrors. He looks for flesh, for breath, for the kind of story that measures success in softness rather than shock. When a script arrives about a young surgeon, brilliant, autistic, earnest, he pauses. This will require more than skill. It will require reverence. If L taught him to study thought, this role will ask him to honor feeling in a culture that often misreads it. He meets with consultants, doctors, and families. He listens. He learns what patience sounds like when the world moves too fast, what love looks like when words aren't the first language. He understands the risk of caricature and the necessity of care. He closes the script, places both hands on the cover, and breathes. This is the warmth he asked for. This is the human he promised himself. Death Note didn't harden him. It clarified him. He discovered the exact line where darkness reveals what light hides, and where darkness, if indulged, erases the very people it claims to protect. He will carry that compass into every set, every scene, every choice that asks, will you perform to impress or to connect? He knows his answer now. The world thinks he has proven his range. He knows he's only proven his responsibility. And the next role will test that responsibility in the most delicate arena of all: medicine, mind, and the courage to make sincerity louder than spectacle. Chapter 10. Good Doctor, Good Man. The hospital lights are merciless. They bleach color from skin, pride from posture, and patience from anyone who stands beneath them too long. For Kento Yamazaki, those lights would become both teacher and test. He arrives on set carrying a notebook, not a script. Inside, handwritten notes from real doctors, interviews with autism consultants, diagrams of the human heart. His next role, a young autistic surgeon in Good Doctor, is not about brilliance, it's about humanity without filters. When he first reads the story, he pauses halfway. It's not the medical jargon that frightens him. It's the responsibility. To play a man who feels the world too deeply means letting go of masks. And after years of performing perfection, Kento knows that truth is far harder than talent. On the first rehearsal day, the director gives him one instruction: don't imitate, listen. So he listens, to the hum of the fluorescent lights, to the nervous rhythm of his own breathing, to the quiet in the spaces between dialogue. His character, Minato, doesn't fill silence. He honors it. And through that silence, Kento discovers something rare: the power of purity in a world addicted to polish. The cast surrounds him with patience. The crew watches closely. Every tilt of the head, every shift in gaze, every pause before speaking becomes a world of meaning. At first, he worries it's too small, too subtle. Then, during a scene where Minato observes a dying child and can't find words, the director whispers, "Don't force the emotion. Let the audience cry because you can't." When the camera rolls, Kento simply stands there, eyes trembling, hands uncertain, shoulders trying to remember what composure feels like. The scene ends in stillness. And in that stillness, the crew sees something sacred, truth without translation. Between takes, he isolates himself, not as vanity, but as method. He walks hospital corridors during breaks, learning their rhythm. Doctors hurry past, nurses whisper, monitors beep like impatient clocks. He memorizes how care sounds when it's tired, how empathy walks when it's heavy. He starts journaling again. To act is to understand without judgment, he writes. Minato doesn't lack emotion. He feels too much to lie. He begins to envy that purity. During one late shoot, an extra playing a patient starts crying mid-scene. It isn't scripted. The moment feels alive, uncontrollable. Kento doesn't break character. He steps closer, quietly places his hand over hers, and whispers, "It's okay." The line wasn't written, but it stays in the final cut. Later, when he watches it, he doesn't see performance. He sees compassion meeting its mirror. The show airs. The reaction is overwhelming. Parents of autistic children write letters thanking him for respect, not pity. Doctors praise the detail of his hands, how he holds instruments with the care of someone holding trust. Critics call it career-defining. But Kento doesn't feel defined. He feels softened. 4 months after filming, he carries traces of Minato in his gestures. The slower blinking, the careful speech, the small smiles that replace words. He realizes that embodying a man of such purity changed him more than any award ever could. During one interview, a journalist asks, "How did you prepare to play someone so different from yourself?" Kento smiles gently. "He's not different," he says. "He's what we forget to be." The interviewer laughs, not sure if it's philosophy or modesty. But for Kento, it's neither, it's gratitude. The show's success propels him higher than ever before. Yet, paradoxically, he feels lighter. He no longer fears being boxed in by fame or genre. He's seen the deeper purpose, the human heartbeat beneath every line of dialogue. At charity events and public appearances, he begins to speak less about career and more about kindness. Not as slogans, but as survival tools. He tells young actors, "When you stop chasing approval, you start telling the truth." The words echo across fan forums, turning into quote cards, hashtags, and essays. He doesn't notice. He's already moved on, reading medical journals, volunteering quietly, disappearing again into learning. Because some lessons, he knows, must be relearned every day. Patience, humility, attention. Months later, while visiting a children's hospital, a small boy recognizes him. "Dr. Minato?" the child asks, wide-eyed. Kento kneels beside him, smiles softly, and says, "He's not here today, but I can say hello for him." The boy laughs, satisfied. A nurse whispers, "That was perfect." Kento shakes his head. "That was him," he says. Because in that instant, he didn't perform, he remembered. When award season arrives, he sits through the ceremony quietly. His name is announced. Applause fills the room like warm rain. He walks to the stage, bows, accepts the trophy, and says only this: "For everyone who has ever been misunderstood, thank you for teaching me that understanding is an action, not a feeling." Then he steps back, bows again, and leaves the stage to thunderous silence, the kind that means reverence. After the show ends, he takes a break from acting. Not to escape, but to reflect. He travels without entourage, eats alone in small restaurants, watches strangers with the same curiosity he once gave characters. He begins writing letters to himself, one for each role he's played. Each ends with a lesson. Minato's letter is short. "You reminded me that kindness is intelligence, too." He folds it carefully, places it in the same box as the old fan letters, and closes the lid. Good Doctor didn't make him untouchable. It made him reachable. And reach, he learns, is the true purpose of art, not to rise above the world, but to hold it more gently. He no longer measures success by how many people know his name, but by how many remember a feeling after he's gone. One evening, during a late walk through Shinjuku, he pauses at a crosswalk. Rain glitters on the asphalt like a field of stars. He looks up and sees his reflection in a bus window, his face half-lit by a passing advertisement for Good Doctor. For a moment, he almost waves to it. Not as vanity, as farewell. Because he knows that version of himself will stay there, healing strangers he'll never meet, long after he's moved on. But every healer faces a battle of exhaustion, the quiet erosion that comes from giving too much. And as his next project calls him into another demanding world, he'll need to rediscover not empathy, but endurance. Chapter 11, Kingdom, the Warrior Within. Dawn is a blade. It cuts a thin silver line across the practice floor, through the fog of breath, along the edge of a wooden sword. The studio is quiet except for the metronome of footwork, slide, plant, cut, Slide, plant, cut. Sweat darkens the fabric at Kento Yamazaki's collarbones. His palms burn where calluses are deciding whether to break or harden. No cameras. No applause. Just repetition. A stunt coordinator circles him like a calm storm. Again, he says, not unkind. Shorter step. Hip first. Cut from the ground. Kento nods, resets his stance, and draws power from the floor, not his arms. The bakken whistles, the air parts, and the sound is closer to what a blade should sound like, intent, not noise. This is kingdom, not the costume, not the poster, but the work beneath the armor. Before the horse, before the battlefield, before the roar of extras, there is this room where a man learns to move like a warrior and breathe like one too. The first shock isn't the swordplay. It's weight. The armor is honest in the way heavy things are honest. It does not negotiate. It pulls at the shoulders, bites at the ribs, steals breath from the diaphragm until you learn to make more. The helmet narrows sight into a tunnel. The boots remind you that glory must be carried on sore feet. Kento puts it on and feels his posture lie. He straightens it by will. The stunt captain adjusts a strap, checks the clearance of the scabbard, and grunts approval. Now run, he says. They run drills until language disappears. Commands are hands, eyes, and timing. He learns to fall without fear, to roll without panic, to stop on a mark the size of a coin while dust blinds the world. He learns that every clean moment on screen is built on 100 ugly ones in training. At lunch, he eats in silence, tasting iron in his throat. Someone asks how he's doing. He smiles. I'll be better by tomorrow. It isn't bravado, it's a contract. The choreography grows into a map, beats that look like chaos but live on geometry. Less arms, the coordinator says. Whole body. Less face, the director adds. More soul. Kento writes both in his notebook and draws a small square around them. He discovers that economy is the secret of power. Shorter steps. Tighter arcs. No wasted reach. When he stops trying to look fierce and lets the movement speak, the camera leans in. The warrior shows up, quiet, dangerous, purposeful. But purpose has a cost. On the third week, his right wrist rebels. He ices it between takes, then tapes it before the next scene. A bruise blooms along his forearm like spilled ink. The medic frowns. The stunt captain shrugs. It means you're learning, he says. But don't be stupid. Technique saves bodies. Kento adjusts his grip, lower on the tsuka, closer to the guard, control over muscle, leverage over pride. The pain recedes. The cut cleans. The scale of kingdom reveals itself on the field. Dozens, then hundreds, of bodies in armor. Horses tossing their manes like thunder. Dust rising into a living sky. Cameras on cranes swoop and dive. Flags snap like commands. The director's voice becomes wind. The first big charge is a long take. Everyone knows where they must be when the drum hits beat 14. A misstep, and the dance collapses. Kento breathes deep, feels the weight of the sword as part of his arm, and tells his legs what his eyes can't see. Trust the count. Action. He runs. The air tastes of earth and steel. A stuntman hits his timing late. Kento adjusts a half step without breaking the line and buries the cut into empty space where the camera believes an enemy once stood. The blade passes within a whisper of another performer's cheek. Both men flow on, heartbeat steady because panic is expensive and there is no budget for it. Cut. Relief breaks like surf. The director grins for the first time that day. Kento finds a patch of shade, leans against a prop wagon, and thanks the small gods of timing under his breath. Between battles, he learns the soft parts of strength. How to tie greaves for someone else when their hands are shaking. How to coax a skittish horse with breath instead of force. How to listen for fatigue in a partner's voice before a lift goes wrong. One morning, a junior stuntman rips a strap and tries to hide it. Kento kneels, fixes the buckle himself, and gives the kid his own spare. No speeches. Just service. The captain watches from a distance and nods to no one in particular. Leadership can be loud. It doesn't need to be. He also learns to protect stillness. In close-ups, when the storm rages behind him, the temptation is to match the noise. He doesn't. He holds the frame with presence, eyes that track danger, breath that stays measured, a jaw that speaks resolve without words. The lens loves this discipline. It always has. Night shoots arrive, and discipline meets depletion. Armor holds the cold like a grudge. Steam curls from mouths between takes. A horse shivers and Kento lays a palm against its neck until both of them calm. The call sheet runs long. The sun threatens the last setup. The assistant director does arithmetic with weather. In a lull, Kento sits on a crate, closes his eyes, and hears an old voice, less beauty, more truth. He smiles. The man who said it was him. The boy who learned it was everyone who taught him. He stands, shakes the ache from his hands, and returns to the mark. Rolling. Action. He moves through the fight with no spare motion. When the final beat lands, he adds nothing. The restraint feels like thunder. Cut. Print that. He lets himself breathe. People assume battle scenes are adrenaline. Often they are math. Mark to mark, eyeline to eyeline, blade to light. In that math, Kento rediscovers the gift he found years ago in quieter rooms. Presence is precision. The body obeys what the mind believes. The audience believes what the breath allows. On a rare day off, he doesn't celebrate. He goes back to the rehearsal space and drills footwork barefoot, feeling each tendon argue, then agree. He writes in his notebook. Strength is a habit when no one is watching. Train until the costume feels like skin. A warrior protects the scene first, the self second, the ego never. He underlines the last one twice. The film wraps. The armor comes off. He stands under a hot shower until the water stops stinging and starts soothing. Bruises bloom and fade in slow constellations. He sleeps for 12 hours and dreams of dust that refuses to settle. When Kingdom hits theaters, the reaction carries a different music. Viewers talk about scale, yes, but they also talk about weight, how you can feel the heft of the sword, the fatigue behind the eyes, the grit beneath the heroics. He reads a few reviews that say he finally looks dangerous. He laughs softly. Danger wasn't the goal. Honesty was. At a small celebration, someone raises a glass, to the warrior within. Kento bows and answers, to the team that taught him. Because if Good Doctor taught him to honor vulnerability, Kingdom taught him to endure, to carry purpose through pain without becoming numb, to command not by shouting but by moving correctly. He realizes something else too. The battlefield cured him of an old fear. Not the fear of failure. The fear of being seen as strong. Strength, he now understands, is not spectacle. It is stewardship of effort. It is what remains when the camera blinks. The publicity wave arrives like it always does. Interviews, photo shoots, the carousel of praise and comparison. He sits in chairs under softboxes that feel gentler than halberds, but more exhausting than helmets. Smiles are asked for on cue. Stories are sold in slices. After one particularly long day of press, he walks alone through a quiet street and listens for his pulse to return to its own rhythm. The warrior doesn't leave him. He just puts the sword down. The city air is damp and forgiving. He thinks of the training floor at dawn, the count to 14, the horse's breath against his palm. Those are the parts he'll keep. He knows what comes next. Fame expands after battles like ground fog after rain, beautiful from a distance, blinding up close. The world will get louder. The rooms will get brighter. The questions will circle not around craft, but around the echo of it. He straightens his shoulders, not to carry the noise, but to walk through it. He has learned to move like a storm and rest like a stone in a riverbed. But the river ahead is crowded. Press lines, flashing bulbs, hands tugging at every sleeve. Isolation grows where attention thrives. Chapter 12. The Edge of Fame. Fame doesn't arrive like thunder. It seeps in like light under a door, soft at first, then impossible to escape. Kento Yamazaki begins to feel it everywhere. In the way strangers whisper his name on trains. In the cameras that rise before he speaks. in the polite smiles that precede requests for pictures, autographs, answers. After Kingdom, his face becomes a currency. Billboards in Shibuya. Interviews on every network. The same question, rearranged 100 ways. What does success feel like? He smiles each time, because that's what they're buying. Not his words, but the comfort of the smile. He says something true enough to sound profound. It feels like gratitude. And it does. Sometimes. But gratitude, he learns, can also feel like weight. The days compress. Flights. Photo shoots. Brand meetings. A hotel that looks like the last one because it is the last one, just repainted. His schedule becomes a choreography of polite exhaustion. In private, he starts losing the boundaries between performance and person. When cameras flash, his posture corrects itself automatically. Back straight, jaw aligned, expression precise. Even when alone, he sometimes finds himself adjusting the angle of his face toward imaginary light. It's not vanity. It's conditioning. He remembers a line from Kingdom. The warrior dies twice, once in battle and once in comfort. He wonders which death this is. One night, during an overseas press tour, he orders dinner alone in a hotel restaurant. The waiter's eyes widen, recognition flickers, then restraint. Halfway through the meal, a young couple walks past and stops. "Sorry to interrupt, are you?" He nods. They beam. The man says, "We loved Alice in Borderland. You changed how we see Japanese actors." Kento bows, touched but tired. After they leave, he sits staring at the untouched half of his food. The compliment was kind, but it rings like an echo in an empty hall. He wonders when admiration started feeling like distance. Fame, he realizes, is a city with no exits. You can slow down, hide in side streets, but the lights always find you. He used to dream of connection, of art reaching across oceans. Now he feels more like a broadcast tower than a person. Signal strong, silence inside. In interviews, he notices how questions drift further from craft and closer to spectacle. What's your skincare routine? Who are you dating? Do you ever get lonely? He wants to answer honestly. He wants to say, "Yes, I do," especially when everyone is listening. But instead he laughs, the polite kind that fills air like bubble wrap, and gives the safe answer. Because honesty sells poorly when packaged with fatigue. Back in Tokyo, his apartment feels both sanctuary and cell. Stacks of unopened gifts from fans. Posters he never hung. A trophy still in its box. He sits at the piano, the same one from your lie in April. The notes come slower now, like they're learning him again. He plays until the melody begins to sound human. That's when he remembers. The piano never cared who was listening. He starts taking small walks at dawn. No phone. No sunglasses. Just breath and concrete. The city, half asleep, ignores him. It's the kindest thing it's done in years. A bakery owner offers him bread without recognition. A stray cat curls at his feet without asking for a photo. He smiles, realizing this anonymity is the rarest luxury fame can't buy. He writes in his notebook that morning, "Visibility is not connection. Attention is not love." The burnout doesn't crash in one day. It creeps. Like rust under gold. He starts forgetting lines during shoots. Small stumbles he hides with charm. He laughs them off, but inside he feels the fracture widening. His manager notices. "You need rest," he says. Kento nods. But rest, for someone living off momentum, feels like betrayal. He pushes on, until his body decides otherwise. During a late-night shoot mid-scene, his vision narrows to a tunnel. The lights blur. His legs give way. For the first time in his career, he collapses before the director calls cut. When he wakes, there's no applause, only 4 drips and the smell of disinfectant. A doctor says the word exhaustion in a tone that sounds closer to warning. He takes 2 months off. No cameras. No commitments. Just time, the medicine fame never prescribes. At first, the silence feels violent. He twitches at every vibration, expecting a call that doesn't come. Then slowly, the tension uncoils. He sleeps without alarms. He eats without interviews. He rediscovers stillness as something earned, not forced. He spends a week in his hometown. Old friends greet him with easy laughter and no questions about his career. They play soccer badly, on a field that smells of dust and memory. After a clumsy kick, someone teases, "Guess the Warrior's gone soft." He laughs, and realizes he hasn't laughed like that in years. On his last night there, he sits beneath a quiet sky. No spotlights. No lenses. Just stars. He whispers to himself, "If fame is a mirror, then I need to remember which side I'm standing on." He decides that when he returns, he'll choose differently. He'll protect his craft the way a monk protects silence, fiercely, reverently, without apology. When he finally steps back into Tokyo's rhythm, something about him has changed. Not the look, not the voice, the pace. He moves slower, speaks less. In meetings, he no longer rushes to fill silence. In interviews, he answers only what he means. People notice. Some call it maturity. Others call it distance. He calls it peace. The fame remains. You can't undo a name once it's known, but it no longer drives him. He's learned that applause doesn't fill you. It echoes until you learn to hum back. He begins to see himself as two people, the public Kento, who smiles for the world, and the private one, who keeps a promise to stay real. For the first time, they coexist without fighting. At a press conference for his next project, a reporter asks, "You've become one of Japan's most recognizable faces. What's your next goal?" Kento pauses. The room leans forward, expecting something grand. Hollywood, directing, global dominance. He smiles faintly. "To disappear," he says, "but on purpose." The laughter that follows is warm, not mocking, because they sense what he means: to vanish into the work, not from it. To let art speak louder than image. And as flashes pop like distant thunder, Kento Yamazaki blinks slowly and holds his breath, just long enough to remind himself that fame too needs oxygen to survive. He has reclaimed balance, but peace is temporary in the world he lives in. The next script waiting on his desk carries a name both familiar and foreign, one that will drag him across borders and into the glare of global streaming screens. The world is watching, and this time, he cannot hide. Chapter 13, Alice in Borderland. The city is too quiet for Tokyo. Traffic lights blink to no one. Pedestrian crossings hum like empty stages. Wind walks down Shibuya streets carrying the sound of shutters, not voices. A playing card lies face up on the asphalt, the red heart glaring like a warning. Rolling. Kento Yamazaki steps into frame as Arisu, shoulders slightly caved, eyes scanning a world that once loved him and now refuses to answer. The camera breathes with him. This isn't the orchestra of Kingdom or the antiseptic hum of Good Doctor. This is the sound of survival, shoes on concrete, breath against panic, silence heavy enough to bruise. Action. He moves. Not like a warrior or a saint, like a kid who never asked for any of this and has just realized no one is coming to help. What the audience doesn't see, hours before that take, he stood alone at the edge of set and listened to the emptiness. He wanted it in his bones before it reached his eyes. Because Alice in Borderland isn't a spectacle to him, it's a feeling, the moment you understand that your world can vanish, and your only compass is the person you decide to be next. From the first table read, the energy is strange, electric and fragile. The cast laughs easily, then quiets as if not to wake something sleeping under the script. The director says, "This story works only if we believe the fear." No one nods. They just adjust their chairs. Arisu is not a hero forged in daylight. He's not even sure he's a hero at all. He's a gamer, an observer, a boy who reads the room faster than he reads himself. Kento recognizes him instantly. The quiet eye. The brain that solves before the mouth speaks. The guilt that arrives early and refuses to leave. He writes a single sentence at the top of his script. Think first, hurt second, but feel both. That becomes the spine of his performance. The first big game sequence is a choreography of dread. Cameras on cranes, extras cued by earpiece, explosions measured to the half-second. But when the countdown starts, none of that matters. You can't fake pulse. Kento uses the same ritual that steadied him for Death Note and softened him for Good Doctor. 5 breaths, palms open, eyes down. When he lifts his gaze, the world has narrowed to the lens and the truth. Arisu move. He doesn't run pretty. He runs like someone who learned urgency in one step. He clips a table corner, stumbles, recovers on instinct. The director keeps it, because surviving isn't elegant, it's accurate. Between takes, he studies the set the way Arisu would study a map. Entry points, angles, the physics of escape. When a stunt coordinator offers a more cinematic sprint line, Kento asks, "What would a panicked mind do?" They reroute. The scene breathes different. It breathes right. Fame has its own gravity, and global streaming multiplies it. The production feels larger than anything he's done, not just in scale but in consequence. He can sense the audience before they exist, hovering at the edge of every shot. Japan, yes, but also Sao Paulo, Melbourne, Madrid, Manila, Lagos. People who've never seen Shibuya will walk those streets through his fear. He's careful with that. He knows what visibility can do when it outruns meaning. One evening, after a punishing day of night shoots, he stands alone under the overpass that frames a key chase. The concrete sweats from the cold. He thinks of all the versions of himself the world has tried to keep. Heartthrob, warrior, prodigy, saint. Arisu is none of those, and that is the freedom. Don't pose, he tells himself. Don't protect. Let the lens see the human trying to survive the scene. Arisu's core is sorrow weaponized into strategy. The script gives him guilt like a riddle that can't be solved, only carried correctly. Kento does not perform that guilt. He remembers it, the auditions where his voice failed, the wrong piano note he kept playing, the exhaustion that knocked him down on set. Memory becomes muscle. Muscle becomes presence. Presence becomes Arisu. He learns to speak with stillness again. In one quiet scene, he stares at a skyline that refuses to feel familiar. The line on the page is short. The silence after is longer. He lets the hurt arrive unsupervised. When the director calls cut, no one claps. They just breathe. The physical demands are different than Kingdom, but no softer. Sprints on repeat. Stairwells taken 3 at a time. Falls that must look unsafe and be safe. He trains his voice to carry fear without breaking, his eyes to register disaster without making it melodrama. He practices the micro-hesitation that precedes courage, because only cowards on television move without doubt. Real people hesitate. Real people choose. He asks for rehearsals not to perfect the movement, but to earn the reaction. If the body understands, he says to the AD, the face won't have to lie. It becomes a guiding principle for the entire set. Then the thing every actor secretly fears happens: global wildfire. The series lands, and the world watches with mouths half open and phones half charged. Overnight, Arisu becomes a passport into homes Kento will never enter in person. The messages arrive in languages he cannot read, but he recognizes the shape of gratitude. I saw myself in your fear. You taught me to think under pressure. I didn't know a quiet character could carry a show. He is humbled, grateful, and alert. He knows love can be a leash if you stop walking. He says yes to interviews that talk about craft. He says no to anything that tries to replace the work with a rumor. When asked if he expected this level of success, he answers, "No one can expect an earthquake. You can only learn how to stand." Season 2 intensifies everything: the games, the stakes, the eyes. Kento resists the temptation to scale emotion with budget. Bigger does not mean louder. He keeps Arisu's heartbeat small, private, the way panic actually feels in the chest. The show gets noisier, the performance gets quieter. Paradox creates gravity. The lens can't look away. On the hardest night, when exhaustion tastes metallic and the city's emptiness starts to feel personal, he finds a pocket of shadow by a doorway and closes his eyes. He hears the old promise he made to himself after collapsing on set: protect the craft like a monk protects silence. He opens his eyes and steps into another take. He doesn't force bravery. He chooses it. A journalist later asks him to define Arisu in one line. He thinks for a long beat, then says, "He's proof that thinking is a kind of courage." It isn't a slogan. It's a map for Arisu, for himself, for anyone who learned to survive by noticing. He didn't know it then, but Alice in Borderland would change the shape of his audience and the rhythm of his days. Airports become living comment sections. Photographers learn his angles before he sits down. He feels the old edge of fame approaching again, but this time he carries a steadier compass. Because the series did more than make him global. It reminded him that stories travel farther than faces, and the work will outlast the weather if he keeps telling the truth. When the final night shoot ends, he walks alone through the emptied intersection that millions will one day see filled with ghosts and games. Neon breathes. A delivery bike snaps by, indifferent to cinema. He smiles. The city doesn't care who he is. That is mercy. He pockets a laminated prop card the crew gifted him, a small heart, a small reminder. Not of victory, of risk. He whispers to the empty street, "Thank you," and means it. The world is watching now, not just Japan. The interviews multiply in languages he doesn't speak. The flights widen, the questions sharpen. He will need to cross borders without losing himself, to let Tokyo teach the world what silence can say. Chapter 14. The world discovers Tokyo. The airport smells of metal and camera flashes. Tokyo is behind him, but not really. It travels now in every step he takes. Customs, boarding gates, press lines. The world doesn't say Kento Yamazaki anymore, it says Japan. He feels it most when landing in Los Angeles. Billboards hum with faces that look nothing like his, yet somewhere between the palm trees and the glare of fluorescent English, someone shouts his name across the barrier. Yamazaki. Arisu. The accent is wrong. The feeling is right. He bows instinctively. The crowd doesn't bow back, but they smile, wide, curious, respectful. That's when he realizes, this isn't fame. It's translation. His country has begun to speak through him. A week later, he stands under the hot lights of an American talk show set. The host greets him with practiced warmth. The crowd cheers too soon. He knows only a handful of them have seen his work, but they know the rhythm of applause. He bows again, sits, and answers questions through an interpreter who hesitates over nuance. Was it hard to film in Japan's heat? Did you ever expect to be Netflix famous? Do you think Hollywood should make more shows like yours? He smiles. Each answer is a negotiation between truth and diplomacy. We filmed with heart, he says. I didn't expect fame. I expected honesty. I think the world should make more stories, not copies. The translator stumbles on the last word. Kento repeats it in English himself. Not copies. The audience laughs, not unkindly, but missing the depth. He lets them. After the show, a producer tells him, "You're very calm on camera." He nods. "I learned from silence." She laughs. That's rare here. He doesn't argue. For weeks, he travels across continents, premieres, interviews, roundtables. Each city offers new questions that sound like old ones. Behind every smile, he feels the quiet tug of fatigue. In London, he's asked about the Japanese work ethic. In Seoul, about the new wave of Asian cinema. In New York, about how it feels to represent your country. He answers truthfully each time, but truth, he realizes, is different in every language. It feels heavy, he admits to a small press group one night. But not in a bad way. It's the weight that keeps you grounded. The reporter writes it down. The quote trends online the next day. The weight that keeps you grounded. They call it poetic. To Kento, it's simply physics. Back home, Tokyo watches. The newspapers call him the quiet export. A headline reads, Kento Yamazaki, Japan's global whisper. He smiles at that one. It fits. Because in a world of shouting, whispering travels farther. When Alice in Borderland reaches its peak, journalists from Europe to South America start describing Japan through him. Its discipline, its empathy, its artistry. He becomes the reference point for an entire generation of Japanese performers who want to reach beyond borders without losing their roots. But fame across cultures is a balancing act. In interviews abroad, he's the Japanese star. In interviews at home, he's the man who went global. In his own mind, he's still just a boy who learned to breathe between takes. He writes in his notebook, "When they see Tokyo through me, I hope they see its silence too." At the Cannes red carpet, the air is thick with perfume and flashbulbs. The sound of photographers counting in different languages feels like static. He moves through it as he always has, measured, polite, deliberate. A journalist asks him, "How do you stay so composed?" He answers with a small smile, "Because my city taught me rhythm." Later, in a quiet corner of the festival after-party, he stands by the sea, shoes in hand. The French Riviera glows like fiction. He stares at the horizon and thinks about Shibuya's neon, about the piano he left behind, about the narrow alleys where he used to eat ramen between auditions. Fame, he realizes, isn't a ladder. It's a circle. It always leads back to where you started, if you're lucky enough to remember the path. Months later, he returns to Tokyo for the first time in what feels like years. It's raining, the good kind of rain, the kind that knows when to stop. He steps out of the airport, no cameras, no noise. Just the hum of the city that raised him. The same crosswalks, the same lights, the same ghosts. Tokyo doesn't ask him for autographs. It asks him to keep walking. And he does. At a small cafe tucked between Shinjuku's towers, an elderly woman serves him tea without recognition. "Busy day?" she asks. He laughs softly. "Just a long one." She nods, pours the tea, and says, "Drink slowly. The world will wait." He looks up, startled, because it feels like advice from a movie that hasn't been written yet. He drinks. Slowly. Over time, invitations arrive from Hollywood. Superhero offers, remakes, scripts filled with explosions and empty dialogue. He reads them all. Then closes the folder. Because something inside him whispers louder than ambition, not every opportunity is a step forward. He remembers what Good Doctor taught him, sincerity. What Kingdom taught him, endurance. What Alice in Borderland taught him, adaptability. And now, Tokyo is teaching him balance. He chooses smaller films again, stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things quietly. Journalists call it a surprising move. He calls it breathing. One evening, he's invited to speak at an international film symposium. Directors from across the world gather to discuss the future of global cinema. When it's his turn, he stands, adjusts the mic, and says in English, softly but clearly, "Maybe the future isn't global. Maybe it's local, shared, not exported. Because the truth in one language should still make another heart understand." The room falls silent. Then the applause starts, not thunderous, but genuine. That's the sound he's been chasing all along. After the event, a young filmmaker from Brazil approaches him. She says, "You made me want to film Tokyo, not as a tourist, but as if I lived there." He smiles. "That's how I film Japan too." They exchange bows instead of handshakes. In that gesture, he sees what art can do, erase the border between observer and observed. When he returns home that night, he stands by his window overlooking the city. The skyline is the same, but it feels different now, not smaller, not bigger, just seen. The world discovered Tokyo, yes. But through that discovery, Tokyo discovered itself, humble, luminous, alive. He whispers, half to the glass, half to the stars. We don't need to shout to be heard. And somewhere in that reflection, the boy from Harajuku, the doctor, the warrior, the survivor, all of them bow in quiet agreement. Yet even calm seas hide storms below. Fame has steadied him, but life will test his peace again, through burnout, through solitude, through the whisper of a world that always wants more. To survive what comes next, he'll need to return inward. Chapter 15, Pressure and Peace. Morning arrives with a soft gray that doesn't ask for anything. No premieres. No interviews. No costumes waiting on a rack. Just a kettle whistling in a quiet kitchen, a chipped mug, and the city breathing somewhere beyond the curtains. Kento Yamazaki sits at the table and stares at steam curling like handwriting he can almost read. The calendar on his phone is finally blank. He should feel victorious. Instead, he feels hollow in a way that sleep doesn't fix. The symptoms have been creeping for months. Lines slipping, appetite thinning, patience wearing down to threads. Fame is loud when it enters and silent when it leaves you depleted. He didn't notice the silence until now. He takes a slow breath. The room holds it with him. He lets it go. Somewhere inside, a decision turns. The first task of rest is learning to be unimportant again. He begins with small rituals, shoes by the door, phone on airplane mode, a short walk before the city wakes. He buys fruit from a shop that doesn't know his name and carries it home like a blessing. He cleans the countertop. He waters a plant that has forgiven him for months of neglect. He writes a single sentence on a page. What I refuse to lose: honesty, pace, presence. The days unfold without drama. He reads novels, then nothing. He listens to the hum of the refrigerator and learns that peace sometimes sounds like appliances. When the anxiety spikes, ghost alarms ringing in a quiet house, he sits on the floor, palms on the tatami, and lets the echo pass through. No fighting. No bargaining. Just weather. He remembers a note from Good Doctor. Understanding is an action. Perhaps peace is too. But pressure is clever. It doesn't knock. It arrives dressed as opportunity. Scripts stack up. The phone vibrates with offers that look like answers. Global franchises, luxury campaigns, a cameo that would break the internet for 24 hours. He imagines saying yes. He imagines the press lines, the compliments, the rush of momentum. He can almost feel the armor sliding back onto his shoulders. Then he imagines the other thing, the thinness, the speed, the version of himself that poses when no one is watching. He closes the folder. He pours more tea. He waits for the need to please to pass. Instead of filming, he studies. He visits a calligraphy studio where the master greets him with indifference that feels like mercy. Hold the brush, the teacher says. Stand like a mountain. Breathe like a river. The first stroke is ugly. The second is worse. He laughs out loud, startled by the joy of being bad at something without consequences. The master smiles, not unkind. Again. He returns every week. In that room, fame cannot help him. Only attention can. He learns to let the ink run without panic, to accept that the line knows where it wants to go if his hand stops trying to impress. On the train home, he realizes he's been practicing a different kind of acting, the art of non-resistance, meeting the moment as it is, not as he would like it to appear. He adds swimming to his mornings, counting tiles like mantras. He cooks simple food. He calls his parents more. One afternoon, he visits the small soccer field where a boy once walked past a stranger with a business card and a future. Grass has replaced the dust. Children run badly and beautifully. He sits on the bench and lets memory overlap with gratitude until the edges blur. A boy misses a shot and looks around to see who noticed. Kento raises a hand in theatrical disappointment, then gives a thumbs up that makes the boy grin and try again. The ball sails true. The cheer in the boy's chest is loud enough to lift the clouds. Sometimes peace is borrowed from someone else's joy. A director friend invites him to a tiny rehearsal for a stage piece he isn't in. No pressure, just watch, she says. He sits in the back and feels the room move as actors forget and then remember why they love this. Afterward, they all eat noodles at a cramped counter. No one asks for selfies. They argue about pacing and silence as if those were the only two ingredients in art. Someone teases him for being too quiet. He smiles. I'm collecting, he says. You talk. I'll remember. He walks home under soft rain and notices what he used to miss. The exact way streetlight halos dissolve in puddles, the civility with which strangers share umbrellas, the courage of a snail crossing a sidewalk as if danger didn't exist. He laughs at himself. This is what burnout took, the capacity to notice. Now, noticing is back. With rest comes clarity. He begins to sort the offers again, not by scale, but by temperature. Does the script feel warm or cold? Does it ask him to become smaller or deeper? Does it serve applause or truth? He makes a rule he doesn't announce. No roles that require speed before sincerity. He can move fast, yes, but not before he believes. His manager worries about timing. There's a window, he says on the phone. Windows close. Kento looks at his plant, newly alive, and answers gently, so do doors. We open the right ones. They adjust. The world does not fall apart. He sleeps. And then, because rest is not the absence of pressure but the restoration of choice, he feels curiosity return the way rain returns to a river it always owned. An indie script arrives. Small budget. Small stakes. Big heart. A character who doesn't speak for the first 20 minutes because he doesn't know how. Not a gimmick, an honest wound. Kento reads it twice, then a third time with a pencil. He circles moments that feel like pulse instead of plot. He meets the director in a cafe with bad lighting and perfect tea. I don't want you to fix him, she says. I want you to sit with him until he moves. He nods. This is the kind of work that doesn't ask him to be larger than life, only exactly as large as a life. He says yes. Not to get back on top. To get back inside. Filming begins months later, after the quiet has done its quiet work. On day one, he steps onto set with a different posture, the kind you can't fake because it doesn't perform. It simply is. Between takes, he protects the piece he earned. He doesn't scroll. He doesn't eavesdrop on gossip. He stands near a window and lets the light do the speaking. The crew notices. The acting feels unforced, the atmosphere less brittle. Someone whispers, he's softer. Someone else answers, no, he's clearer. At lunch, a grip asks him how he keeps calm. He says, I quit trying to win scenes. I try to breathe them. But peace is not a permanent address. It is a practice. And practices are tested. Midway through the shoot, a rumor explodes online. Fabricated, sticky, efficient. It spreads faster than any performance can catch. His phone vibrates like a trapped insect. The old panic claws at the edges. He puts the phone in a drawer. He takes a walk. He calls his mother. He returns to set and asks the director for 1 minute before the next take. He closes his eyes and hears the litany he wrote months ago. Honesty, pace, presence. He inhales for 4. Holds for 4. Exhales for 8. When he opens his eyes, the rumor is still out there. But in here, the truth is louder. The take is the best of the week. That night, his team releases a simple statement that neither feeds nor ignores the fire. It passes. They always do. Not because the world becomes kinder, but because he stops lending it oxygen. By the end of the production, he understands what this season of his life has been teaching. Pressure is a river. Peace is learning where the banks are. He cannot stop the current. He can shape its path. He puts the kettle on one last quiet morning, not as recovery but as ritual. Steam writes its soft language. He can read it now. He smiles. He has not conquered anything. He has chosen. The stillness has sharpened him, but the world will ask for more than serenity. It will ask for insight, for the courage to look past the mirror and speak from the interior. The next chapter won't be louder, it will be deeper. Chapter 16, Behind the Eyes. The camera doesn't roll. There's no director, no slate, no action. Just a mirror, and a man staring into it long enough to wonder who's watching whom. Kento Yamazaki traces the line of his reflection with tired eyes. He's been looking outward for too long, into scripts, into audiences, into expectations. Now, after years of noise, the quiet feels heavier than sound. He leans closer, studying the small tremor beneath the surface, the kind no makeup can hide. Not weakness, not fatigue, just the human that art sometimes forgets to protect. It begins as an interview request. A documentary team wants to film a day in the life of Japan's global star. He hesitates, then agrees, but only if it can be filmed at his pace. No manufactured moments. No retakes. The first morning of shooting, he walks into frame half asleep, hair unstyled, voice soft. The crew waits for him to switch on. He doesn't. Instead, he makes coffee in silence. Steam curls through the lens, and for the first time, the camera witnesses what it's rarely allowed to, being, not performing. When the director asks for a quote about success, he shrugs. Success is just noise you can't control. What matters is what you hear when it stops. The line makes it into the final cut. Not because it's poetic, but because it's true. As the months unfold, his interviews take a different tone. He stops selling perfection. He starts talking about empathy, about how acting is not imitation but compassion in disguise. To act, he tells one reporter, is to love someone you'll never meet, even if that someone is a part of yourself. The quote spreads across social media. For the first time, the attention feels aligned with meaning. He begins visiting schools quietly, without press. He speaks to acting students about the invisible craft, how presence is built from breath, not spotlight. He tells them to study humanity before technique. He watches their faces, eager, anxious, alive, and he recognizes himself, the boy who once thought performance was escape, not expression. After one session, a student approaches him shyly. "How do you deal with people expecting you to always be strong?" she asks. Kento pauses, then answers softly, "By letting them see me when I'm not." The student nods, half understanding now, fully understanding later. Back home, the notebook returns to the desk, a companion through every season. He writes not about roles, but about noticing. How kindness changes tone when no one's recording. How silence teaches what fame forgets. How truth hides in details the lens ignores. The pages fill with fragments that will never be published. They're not essays, they're mirrors, each one reflecting the version of himself that acting cannot touch. He begins sketching, too. Not for art, but for clarity. Faces, lines, motion frozen in ink. He draws eyes, dozens of them. Some calm, some furious, some frightened. When a friend asks why, he says, "Because eyes are where pretending ends." He realizes that in every role he's ever played, the eyes told the story first, the truth beneath the dialogue. That's why he's careful now, even in stillness. Not to perform emotion, but to allow it to exist. One night, while cleaning the piano keys, he finds an old photograph tucked beneath the lid, from your lie in April. He looks younger, unscarred by scale. The image pulls a small, unplanned laugh from his throat. He sits down, presses a single note. It rings pure, unhurried. Then another. Then silence. He whispers, "You can't chase peace. You can only stop running." The next morning, a letter arrives from a fan in Chile, handwritten, translated roughly into Japanese. It reads, "When I watched Alice in Borderland, I saw a man trying to survive the world. When I watched your interviews, I saw a man trying to understand it. Thank you for showing both." He folds the letter carefully and places it with the others. Not as memorabilia, but as evidence that truth, even whispered, travels farther than fame ever could. As the documentary nears release, the team sends him a preview. He watches it alone. It feels strange, seeing himself unguarded, small gestures magnified by honesty. No background music, no edits to smooth imperfections. When the film ends, he sits in silence. For a moment, he wonders if it's too raw, too exposed. Then he realizes, exposure is not vulnerability when it's deliberate. It's clarity. He calls the director. "It's fine," he says. "Don't fix it. Let people see." After the release, something shifts. Critics call it a meditation on authenticity. Fans call it a side of Kento we've never seen. He calls it a beginning. Because for the first time, he isn't hiding behind characters. He's revealing the human who makes them possible. And that, he understands now, is the only legacy that lasts. Months later, at an industry event, he meets a journalist who's followed his career since the early days. "You've changed," she says. He smiles. "I hope so." She nods. "But your eyes, they're the same." He laughs softly. "Maybe that's the point. You grow everywhere else, but the eyes keep the original script." She writes it down. He doesn't mean it as a quote, but it becomes one anyway. In private, he still questions, still wrestles with the same ghosts, perfection, fatigue, meaning. But now he does it differently. He lets the doubt exist without letting it decide. He's learned that peace isn't the absence of chaos, it's friendship with it. The mirror on the wall reflects the same face, but the gaze is steadier now. He studies it, not with vanity, but with grace. "You're not the boy from Harajuku anymore," he whispers. "But he'd still recognize you." And that, he thinks, is enough. Later, as dusk paints Tokyo gold, he sits by his window with the same chipped mug and the same city humming below. He writes one last line in the notebook before closing it for the night. "I don't act to be seen anymore. I act to see." He sets down the pen. Outside, the lights flicker on one by one. Not applause, not attention, just life continuing at its own rhythm. And somewhere behind his eyes, stillness smiles. He has reached understanding, but not the end. The mirror has shown truth. Now the world will demand what he's learned to keep: privacy, purpose, self. To endure the spotlight without burning, he must learn to protect what fame cannot buy. Chapter 17. Learning to Lose. The screening room is small enough to hear disappointment breathe. Rows of folding chairs. A dim exit sign. The hush that follows end credits when a film lands softer than it hoped. Kento Yamazaki watches names roll past like paper boats on dark water. Around him, polite compliments shuffle into the aisle, the kind spoken in the tone people use when they truly mean try again. He smiles, thanks the crew, bows to the investors. In the hallway, the producer squeezes his shoulder and whispers, "We'll build from here." It's the kindest version of "we missed." Outside, the night is honest. No red carpet. No cameras. Just the city inhaling. He walks without headphones, letting the low hum of traffic decide his pace. A poster for the film glows from a bus stop, his own face looking back with belief that reality did not return. He stops, studies it, and says quietly to the glass, "We lost." The word does not cut. It clarifies. Losing is not new. He's lost roles, lost time, lost parts of himself to the machine. But this loss lands differently, not as humiliation, but as measurement. The film had heart, the audience wanted heat. The timing was off by a season and a half. 100 variables that no talent can bully into alignment. Back home, he pours tea and opens the notebook. He writes 3 lines. What failed? What was honest? What was noise? He forces himself to answer without flattery or defense. He circles the moments that were true and underlines every choice that smelled like fear disguised as strategy. The list is not cruel. It is accurate. Accuracy, he has learned, is a mercy that stings. He doesn't sleep much. He doesn't need to. The loss is awake enough for both of them. The whispers arrive the next day. Not scandalous, statistical. Trade papers do math with headlines. Comment sections build narratives out of dust. A pundit calls him overextended. Another calls him too selective for his own good. He reads enough to understand the weather, then closes the window. Losing, he decides, is a class. If he pays attention, it will teach him more than applause ever did. He meets with the director over soba at a quiet counter. There are no autographs, no cameras, just 2 artists counting the cost. They talk about pacing, about where they chased mood when they needed movement, about a third-act choice that honored honesty but starved momentum. "Would you change it?" the director asks. Kento takes a long breath. Not the truth, just the path to it. They clink glasses of barley tea, a toast to a bruise that will blossom into caution where ego might have grown. Weeks turn. Another small wound arrives. A role he wanted goes elsewhere. The call comes in the afternoon, a polite decline wrapped in gratitude for his audition. He thanks them sincerely, hangs up, and sits with a quiet reminder that the work does not owe him a seat. He gives himself an hour of clean disappointment. Not self-harm, not resentment, just the human ache of not this time. When the hour ends, he stands, washes a cup, and returns to practice. Lines, breath, stillness, the unglamorous rituals that have never betrayed him. He writes in the notebook, "Rejection is a rehearsal for humility." But not all losses are professional. Some wear civilian clothes. A friendship thins under the strain of schedules and the misunderstanding that fame quietly breeds. A private rumor bends a family dinner into a court session. A loved one faces an illness that speaks in calendars, not drama. There are no lines to memorize here, no marks to hit, just presence. He sits through hospital hours that move like low tide. He learns the vocabulary of care, small jokes, quiet errands, the bravery of not promising what you cannot deliver. When asked how he is, he answers honestly, tired but together. Loss, he realizes, is not always subtraction. Sometimes it is a rearrangement of priorities, of promises, of the shape your days take when you remember that work feeds life, not the other way around. His team worries that slowing down after the film's stumble will look like retreat. He answers simply, if they need a narrative, they can write one. I need a practice. He returns to basics. Dialect work. Breath exercises. Watching black and white films alone with a notepad and a stubborn attention to the way eyes carry plot when scripts are spare. He reads poetry out loud to recalibrate cadence. He spends an afternoon with a choreographer learning how grief lives in the spine. The point is not punishment. It's return. He conjures the boy who stood in front of the awkward camera years ago and whispers to him, "We're still learning." The boy nods. They keep going. Then something curious happens. The film that missed quietly finds its audience months later on a streaming platform. Messages trickle in from people who watched it alone on headphones at odd hours. One writes, "Your character's silence felt like my own." Another, "The scene everyone said was too slow. Thank you for not rushing that feeling." The numbers never spike, but a different metric rises. Letters that feel like conversations. He smiles at the irony. The market measured one thing. The human heart measured another. Losing, he thinks, is often the wrong name for arriving somewhere you didn't think to look. He takes a meeting with a young director whose short film made him uneasy, in the good way. The script she brings him is lean and imperfect, full of risk that isn't trying to impress. "I don't have the budget for big names," she says, embarrassed. He shakes his head. "Good. Then we won't have to lie." She laughs, surprised. He says yes, not to win anything back, but to build forward differently. During rehearsal, he tries a scene 3 ways and fails beautifully twice. He keeps the failures. Not in the cut, in himself. They guide him away from habits that feel safe and toward choices that feel alive. He writes in the notebook, "Lose the trick. Find the pulse." A festival invites him to speak on a panel titled Resilience. The word makes him wary. He dislikes vocabulary that sounds like a trophy. Still, he goes. On stage, someone asks, "What's your strategy for bouncing back from failure?" He answers without ornament. Don't bounce. Absorb. Let the loss teach you what applause hides. Then move, not to prove, but to learn. The room goes very quiet. The moderator asks if he's afraid of being perceived as fragile. He smiles. Fragile things shatter. I'm porous. What needs to pass through will. It becomes the line everyone quotes. He doesn't plan it. He rarely plans the sentences that matter. In private, he practices another kind of losing, letting go of the version of himself that never misses. It's an old ghost, persistent and tidy, whispering that perfection is simply a matter of control. He thanks it for its service and releases it like a bird that finally trusts the sky. The relief is physical. Breath gets deeper. Scenes get simpler. He stops trying to win moments and starts trying to be inside them with the kind of honesty that accepts risk as the price of presence. On set, a younger actor asks, "How do you stay calm when a take falls apart?" Kento answers, "By remembering the camera loves truth more than victory." The kid writes it down as if it's a trick. It isn't. It's consent to the mess that makes moments human. The season turns. The numbers from the missed film fade from conversation, but the lessons do not. He remains a student of what didn't work and a guardian of what did. The notebook fills with arrows connecting failure to craft. He walks past that old bus stop poster months later, faded now, the glass scratched, the colors tired. He stops again and bows, not in apology, not in mourning, but in respect. That version of him tried something. The world said not now. He says thank you. Because this is what he understands now. Losing is not the opposite of growth. It is the soil. He has learned to let go without letting up, to treat defeat as data and sorrow as signal. But to turn lessons into longevity, he will need a discipline stronger than momentum, the deliberate practice of quiet. Chapter 18. The Art of Stillness. The morning begins before the light. Tokyo is still asleep, but Kento Yamazaki is awake, barefoot, quiet, breathing. He stands by the window, watching the thin mist lift from the rooftops. No alarms, no calls. Just the hum of existence, gentle and precise. It has taken him years to understand that stillness is not absence. It is presence distilled. He closes his eyes. The silence stretches until it feels alive, like the world holding its breath. In that moment he hears it, the smallest sound, his own heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of dawn. There was a time when he feared slowing down. The industry teaches momentum as survival, the myth that to pause is to disappear. Every empty space, every quiet week, once felt like a threat. But loss had taught him something the spotlight never could. Growth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Now, instead of chasing movement, he studies stillness. He learns it through tea, through walking without headphones, through the discipline of noticing. Each breath becomes a rehearsal for presence. Each pause, a lesson in endurance. He remembers the calligraphy master's words. Ink only flows when the hand is calm. The same is true for art. And for life. At first, stillness feels like exile. The phone grows quiet. Invitations thin. The algorithms that once echoed his name move on to new faces. But beneath that quiet is a kind of truth he had forgotten. The world does not shrink when attention fades, it simply returns to scale. He begins to see again. The way morning light paints furniture differently every day. The rhythm of rain against the window, not as background noise but as music with intent. The face of the vendor at his local market, who greets him not as the actor, but as a neighbor. These are the roles that matter now, the ones no one applauds but everyone lives. One afternoon, during a walk by the river, an elderly man is feeding birds. Kento pauses to watch, the wind brushing his sleeves. The man notices him and smiles. Actors, the man says, they pretend to live. But you, today you're living. The comment lands deeper than expected. He bows slightly, unsure how to answer. When the man leaves, he stays a while longer, letting the river write its sermon. Stillness, he realizes, is not retreat. It is repair. He spends his evenings reading, not scripts, but philosophy. Lao Tzu, Thich Nhat Hanh, Seneca. Ancient words about balance, impermanence, and the art of doing less without being less. He underlines one passage in particular. The wise man acts without doing. He teaches without talking. He copies it into his notebook. Then beneath it, he writes, "Perhaps stillness is the final form of mastery." As months pass, he notices subtle transformations. His acting changes. Scenes that once demanded energy now breathe through patience. Instead of controlling emotion, he allows it to arrive, stay, and depart like weather. The camera feels it too, that invisible honesty between silence and expression. Critics begin calling his new performances restrained, spiritual, mature. He doesn't chase the praise. He simply recognizes that stillness has made him transparent. When ego quiets, truth becomes audible. But stillness is not comfort. It tests. It confronts you with the echoes you once drowned in applause. On sleepless nights, doubt still knocks. Am I disappearing? Am I doing enough? He lets the questions sit beside him like guests he no longer argues with. Eventually, they leave. The next morning, he breathes easier. He writes in the notebook. Stillness is not the lack of storms, it's the ability to stand in one without collapsing. During a quiet winter retreat in the countryside, Kento joins a small meditation group. They rise before sunrise, sit in silence for an hour, and then share tea without speaking. At first, the silence feels unbearable, a mirror without escape. But by the third day, something shifts. The air itself seems thicker with understanding. A monk beside him whispers at the end of the session, "When you stop searching for peace, it starts to recognize you." He smiles. For once, he has nothing to say. Back in Tokyo, people notice the difference. A journalist comments, "You look lighter." He laughs. "Maybe I just stopped carrying things that weren't mine." The interviewer presses for specifics. Fame? Pressure? Expectations? He shakes his head. "Noise," he answers. "All kinds of noise." The clip goes viral. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's rare. A public figure speaking softly in a culture addicted to urgency. Comments flood in. He's found peace. He sounds like he's meditating through fame. But he knows peace isn't a destination. It's maintenance. Months later, during a film shoot, a young actor joins the cast. Nervous, eager, full of questions. "How do you prepare?" the boy asks. Kento smiles. "By being quiet before chaos." The boy looks confused. "Quiet?" "Yes," he says. "Stillness is the first line of every script." He teaches without preaching, by presence. When scenes fall apart, he breathes first, then speaks. The crew begins to mirror his rhythm. The set becomes less tense, more human. He's reminded of what the monk said, teaching without talking. Stillness, however, has one more gift, clarity of direction. It doesn't whisper stop. It whispers simplify. He turns down offers that no longer align. He accepts projects that challenge the spirit, not just the resume. He visits home more often, reconnects with friends who knew him before the noise. He cooks, laughs, walks, repeats. One evening, while watching the sun sink into the cityscape, he realizes, stillness hasn't made him slower. It's made him precise. In the end, he understands that life is not a race against time, but a dance within it. Every pause is part of the choreography. Every silence, a necessary note in the song of becoming. He closes the notebook one final time and writes across the cover. To move with purpose, you must first learn to be still. The ink dries as the evening folds into calm. Outside, the streets glow with quiet gold. He smiles, not because he has arrived, but because he finally knows how to stay. Stillness has become his power, but soon, he'll have to defend it. The spotlight will test his boundaries. The world will pull at the curtain he's so carefully drawn. What happens when privacy and purpose collide? Chapter 19. The Public and the Private. Tokyo glows at night like a secret pretending to be seen. Billboards, camera flashes, streaming lights. The city's pulse is relentless. Kento Yamazaki walks through Shibuya in a hood and mask, just another silhouette in the crowd. Yet even in anonymity, eyes follow him. Not faces, phones. A small red light blinks. Someone somewhere is recording. He feels it before he sees it. The quiet invasion of the lens. Not hostile, just hungry. That's the cost, he reminds himself. The price of being visible in a world that refuses to blink. He keeps walking. Fame is a mirror that never turns off. For years, he thought he could manage it, that humility and kindness would protect him from intrusion. But the truth is simpler. Visibility is a currency, and everyone wants change. Every photo, every angle, every rumor, they don't ask if you want to be seen. They ask how much you'll pay to disappear. When Alice in Borderland hit global charts, The intensity became global too. Fan accounts posted what he ate, what he wore, where he stood. Paparazzi followed patterns in his routes. Morning cafes, late-night walks. He'd step outside and feel the invisible choreography of attention closing in. Once, a stranger shouted his name across an intersection, voice breaking with excitement. He turned, smiled, waved. The clip went viral. For days, comments said, "He's so humble." They didn't see the second half, the part where 10 people started following him home. That night, he deleted his location tags permanently. Privacy, he learns, is not about secrecy. It's about space, the oxygen between self and spectacle. He starts creating boundaries that don't need announcements. No more casual selfies. No more late-night streams. He keeps his relationships invisible, sacred in the age of oversharing. Some fans call it mystery. He calls it maintenance. Because every time he gives too much, he loses a fragment he can't retrieve. He installs blackout curtains. Not because he's paranoid, but because even light feels like an observer now. He writes in his notebook, "To protect peace, you must build walls that let the right wind in." He learns to say no, gracefully, decisively. Not to people, but to exposure. He still appears at premieres, still smiles for cameras, but once the flash fades, he steps out of the frame. He's not running away from fame. He's redefining its perimeter. Still, isolation can become a disguise too heavy to wear. There are moments when solitude whispers lies. No one understands you anymore. He counters it with connection that doesn't require spectacle. A handful of close friends. A quiet dinner with family. Conversations where no one says, "career." These are his rescue lines. Here, he's not Kento the actor, not the headline. Just a son, a friend, a man who likes strong coffee and unplanned laughter. It grounds him. He learns that privacy is not withdrawal, it's preservation. But the world doesn't stop knocking. A magazine publishes photos taken through tinted glass. Him at home, unguarded, barefoot. No scandal, no story, just intrusion dressed as content. He stares at the images and feels the violation more than the anger. That night, he takes a drive out of the city. He stops by the sea. The wind is brutal, salt cutting against his skin. He closes his eyes and says out loud to no one, "I am not a product. I am a person." The waves don't answer. They don't need to. He drives back calmer. Not healed, but anchored. In an interview months later, a journalist asks, "Why do you guard your private life so tightly? Fans want to feel close." He answers gently, "They're already close. My work is the bridge. My silence is the shore." The quote trends for days. Half the comments call it profound. The other half call it distant. He doesn't read them. Because what people call distance is often just self-respect with boundaries. On set, he watches younger actors document everything. Behind-the-scenes selfies, live updates, constant access. He admires their courage, but he also sees the exhaustion forming beneath the smiles. He tells one of them quietly, "You don't owe the world every minute of your becoming." The actor laughs. "But that's what the algorithm wants." Kento smiles back. "The algorithm never sleeps. Humans should." They both laugh. But later, the words stay. He begins working on a new film that explores duality, the tension between truth and illusion, public and private, mask and face. The irony isn't lost on him. During filming, he catches himself using personal memory for emotional authenticity. The director notices. "Where do you find that?" she asks. He answers, "In the part of me no one gets to film." The line stays in her notebook. She calls it the essence of acting, the sacred private fueling the visible public. There are still moments of collision, fan encounters, cameras flashing without consent, headlines twisting a smile into a story. But he meets them differently now. He doesn't fight the tide, he shapes the shore. He releases controlled glimpses, artful photos, reflective interviews, meaningful collaborations. Enough to remind the world he's here. but never enough for them to map his silence. That balance, that art of partial revelation, becomes his new mastery. One evening, a documentary filmmaker he trusts asks to film him at home again. He agrees, but with one condition: no interviews, just sound. They record an hour of him making tea, watering plants, turning pages. No words, just living. When the filmmaker watches the footage, she's moved. "You didn't speak, but it feels like you did." He smiles. "That's all I wanted to say." The segment later airs, titled "The Space Between Fame and Freedom." Viewers describe it as hauntingly peaceful. For once, the world understands. Silence can be dialogue too. He spends the next days quietly, walking, writing, reflecting. Fame, he realizes, is not the opposite of privacy. They coexist like day and night. One illuminates, the other restores. He writes in his notebook, "The public self earns. The private self endures." And for the first time, he doesn't feel split. He feels whole. The walls have been built, and peace restored. But stillness will soon meet motion again. The world is watching, and his legacy is forming. To guide others, he must now embrace the voice he once hid. Chapter 20: The Voice of Japan. The auditorium is quiet before the lights find the stage. No roaring crowd. No pyrotechnics. Just a wooden lectern, a glass of water, and a curtain that breathes as if it too is waiting to hear what will be said. Backstage, Kento Yamazaki rubs his palms together, feeling the old warmth rise, not from nerves, but from responsibility. Tonight isn't a premiere. It's a cultural forum, a gathering of filmmakers, students, workers in street clothes, grandparents with folded programs, kids in school uniforms. 1,000 different lives, one question on every face. What does our voice sound like now? The stage manager whispers, "They're ready." He nods, steps into the light, and bows. The applause is kind, not feverish. The sound people make when they're greeting a neighbor who has come home with stories. "Good evening," he begins softly. "Thank you for letting me share a little silence with you, and a few words too." A few people smile. He smiles back. And somewhere in that exchange, he understands why he's here, not to speak for Japan, but to speak from it. The invitation arrived months earlier with a sentence that made him pause. "We'd like you to talk about the responsibility of being seen." He had almost declined. He doesn't believe in crowns placed by strangers. But the letter was handwritten, the ink imperfect, the tone intimate. He read it twice and heard a voice he trusted, so he said yes, on one condition: no grand titles. "I can only promise honesty." The organizers agreed. What he didn't expect was how the city would treat him in the weeks leading up to the talk. Taxi drivers wishing him luck. A teacher at a crosswalk bowing, whispering, "Speak softly. We'll listen." Even the ramen cook near his apartment, who rarely looks up, sliding an extra egg into the bowl and saying, "For courage." Not pressure. Permission. He wrote notes on index cards in the margin hours of his days, between takes, between trains, between the noise and the next quiet. He didn't write speeches. He wrote questions. What do we export when we send our stories abroad? How do we keep the local in the global? What is the difference between representing and reflecting? The cards looked small. The questions did not. On stage, he speaks without ornaments. "I'm not a politician," he says. "I'm not a philosopher. I'm an actor who learned that cameras are translators. They can make a whisper travel farther than a shout." He tells 3 stories, small ones. First, the boy on the subway who pretended not to notice him, then slipped a note into his hand at the next stop. "My sister started playing piano because of your movie." Second, the old man by the river who said, "Today you're living." Third, a letter from a Brazilian filmmaker who wanted to shoot Tokyo not as spectacle, but as home. "These moments taught me something," he continues. "When we send a story out into the world, it doesn't take our perfection with it. It carries our particularity. The details, the rhythm, the kindness, the courage to be simple." He pauses, lets the quiet widen until it becomes part of the message. I don't want to be the voice of Japan, he says. I want to be a voice from Japan, one of many. If there's any strength in that, it's because I'm speaking in a language my grandparents would recognize. Work carefully, care deeply, and don't waste words. A laugh, a ripple, then stillness again. The room understands. Afterward, there's a Q&A. No microphones rolling down aisles. No pre-screened questions. Just hands and honest curiosity. A young woman asks, how do we keep authenticity when global platforms want speed? He answers, you don't run faster. You aim truer. The world always has time for precision. A middle-aged salaryman clears his throat. What if our stories feel too small? Small is how truth fits into a human day, Kento replies. Small is the size of trust. Then a child barely tall enough to stand at the mic asks, do you get scared? The room smiles, waiting for a gentle platitude. He doesn't give one. Yes, he says. A lot. But fear is also attention. When I'm scared, it means I'm awake. The applause that follows is not loud. It's long. What he doesn't say on stage is this. The title the media keeps stitching onto him, ambassador, symbol, the voice, still doesn't fit. Symbols are flat. Voices crack if they don't rest. He prefers something humbler, messenger. He carries stories from set to street, from street to screen, from screen back to the people who taught him how to look and listen. The weeks after the forum are a chorus from surprising places. A fisherman sends a photo of the dawn off Hokkaido with a note. This is also Japan. Bring this light to your next film. A nurse writes from Aomori, your talk helped a patient smile during chemo. A university club invites him not to speak, but to sit in the back and watch first-year students perform their scenes. He says yes to that last one, and the joy in the room makes him want to cry. He doesn't. He writes, remember this, in his notebook and underlines it twice. He starts to notice a shift on sets, too. When foreign crews arrive, they no longer ask for Tokyo energy like a product. They ask, what's the rhythm we should respect here? He answers with practical instructions that sound like philosophy. Move gently. Listen first. Eat together. During one international co-production, a scene threatens to bloat into spectacle. He asks the director for a smaller take. Let the city breathe, he suggests. Don't outshout it. They try it his way. The editor later tells him the quiet version cut like silk. A reputation forms. Not the glamorous kind, the useful kind. He's the guy who protects the local even when the camera wants to colonize. He wears that like a uniform you don't see but always feel. Yet being considered a voice invites conflict. In a televised panel, a pundit pushes him, if you represent Japan, tell us what Japan is. He shakes his head. I represent only the work I do. Japan is larger than my mouth. It's not defiance. It's scale. He knows what happens when an artist starts speaking as if a city can fit inside a sentence. Nuanced eyes. The path forward is narrower but honest. Embody values without pretending to contain them. So he shows, instead of declares. He arrives early. He leaves spaces cleaner than he found them. He treats the third extra on page 90 with the same attentiveness as the director on page 1. He bows to the crew members who live in shadows brighter than a spotlight. And slowly, people begin to understand that this is the voice they've been hearing, behavior as dialect, consistency as speech. One evening, he's asked to record a short message for disaster relief. A typhoon has torn through a coastal region. He doesn't want to make a performance of sympathy. He writes his own words, keeps it brief. We're with you. Not just tonight. Not just on camera. We'll still be here when the attention moves on. Because that's when help matters most. He sends the clip. Then privately, he sends money and keeps his name off the list. The organizers try to persuade him to go public for awareness. He declines gently. Let the work talk, he says. I'll be there quietly with it. The thank you letter arrives weeks later, handwritten, like the invitation that started all this. Circles. Always circles. There is a cost to all of it, of course. Being careful can look like distance. Being soft can be misread as weak. Being precise can be mistaken for slow. He accepts the misreadings the way a tree accepts wind. Bend. Don't break. At home, he writes the line that has followed him across chapters, roles, flights, years. Legacy is not noise that lingers, it's warmth that remains. If he is to be called a voice, then let it be for warmth, for the way audiences feel held, not dazzled. For the way crews feel seen. For the way Japan feels less like a brand and more like a breathing room where a story can be human. The forum invites him back the following year. He says yes, but with a new idea. No talk, he proposes. Let's host conversations in neighborhoods, film workers, shopkeepers, students, retirees. I'll listen more than speak. They do it. Community halls fill with ordinary genius. A shop owner explains customer grace. A train conductor explains punctual kindness. A teenage poet reads a verse about loneliness on a crowded platform that makes the room go silent. Kento sits, pen poised, overwhelmed by how much country can fit inside a single afternoon. He goes home and writes, "I am not the voice of Japan. Japan is a choir. I'm lucky to be a note." The note has been heard, not just here, but far beyond the archipelago. Streaming charts flare, critics write in new languages, and the world begins to mirror back the warmth he sent out. Recognition arrives like weather across oceans, and with it, a new trial, to wear the laurel without letting it weigh down the work. Chapter 21. Global Recognition. The airport glass doors slide open to a storm of flashbulbs. Not in Tokyo this time, Los Angeles. Not a local press junket, but the world premiere of a story he once filmed quietly, almost modestly, back home. For years, Kento Yamazaki's name had traveled faster than his voice. Subtitles carried him across oceans before interviews ever could. But tonight, standing beneath foreign neon and the roar of global applause, he realizes something both thrilling and fragile. The world finally hears him. He steps onto the carpet, not red, but an ocean of light. Each step feels weightless, not because of fame, but because of scale. Here, Japan is not small. It's seen. Reporters shout questions in English, Spanish, Korean, French. Microphones tilt like sunflowers following the same source of light. He bows slightly, instinctively, centuries of grace compressed into a single motion. A journalist asks, "How does it feel to represent your country on the world stage?" He smiles, deliberate and warm. "I don't represent it. I carry it. Carefully." The translator repeats it. The crowd applauds. And just like that, the phrase becomes a headline before he's even left the carpet. The reviews arrive in waves. American critics call his performance surgical in restraint. European outlets praise his monastic calm. An Australian podcaster simply says, "He acts like silence has subtitles." Streaming charts erupt. Netflix banners carry his face from Sao Paulo to Stockholm. Airline passengers scroll past his image in the in-flight catalog. And somewhere in Shibuya, a billboard glows brighter than the skyline, not selling a product, but reflecting a possibility, that a Japanese actor can lead the world without leaving himself behind. Success, however, is a mirror that distorts if stared at too long. The invitations multiply: Hollywood scripts, European art house offers, fashion endorsements, global panels. Each opportunity louder than the last, each one whispering the same dangerous promise: this is the moment. Don't blink. He feels the old hunger return, the one that measures worth by motion. But stillness has trained him. He remembers his own lesson: move with precision, not panic. So he studies the offers not by prestige, but by pulse. He asks, does it honor craft? Does it feed vanity or voice? Will it make me fluent in someone else's truth or deepen my own? Half he turns down. Half he rewrites. All of them, he meets on his own terms. One director, American, acclaimed, curious, flies to Tokyo just to convince him to star in a bilingual psychological drama. During their first meeting, she confesses, "I don't understand Japan, but I understand pain." He answers, then you understand everything. They work together for months. He improvises scenes that bridge silence and sorrow, using gestures instead of translation. When the film premieres at Venice, it receives an 8-minute standing ovation. He bows once, no tears, no theatrics, and whispers to himself. 8 minutes of noise for years of quiet. Recognition grows beyond cinema. Universities quote his interviews in cultural studies. Fashion houses chase his discipline, calling it the new luxury, composure. He speaks at the United Nations on creative empathy, opening with a line that stops the room. Cinema doesn't need a passport. It needs patience. The translator hesitates, looks up, repeats it slowly. The phrase ripples through the hall like calm through chaos. Back in Tokyo, journalists call him Japan's calm ambassador. But the word ambassador still sits uncomfortably in his chest. He prefers student. The world is a teacher now, every border a blackboard, every culture a new sentence in the language of understanding. Yet global light has its shadows. A rumor, mistranslated. A headline twisted for clicks. Suddenly, empathy is tested again. He watches as online narratives rewrite his silence into mystery, his boundaries into arrogance. He does not defend himself with press releases. He defends himself with consistency. He keeps showing up to sets early. He keeps thanking every technician by name. He keeps doing what truth does best, endure. Weeks later, a foreign journalist writes, "His silence is not avoidance. It's discipline." The tide turns. The awards season arrives. The tuxedo fits, but barely. He's leaner, sharper, quieter. The hall smells of nerves and perfume. When his name is called Best International Performance, he doesn't rise immediately. He exhales once, as if accepting gravity before glory. The applause swells. The world is standing. He takes the stage, looks at the golden statue, and sees not triumph but testimony. He holds the microphone and says, "I come from a country that teaches you to bow before you speak. Tonight, I bow before the people who taught me that kindness survives translation." The room is still. Then it breaks into thunder. He steps off stage, award in hand, thinking of all the invisible hands that made it possible. The calligraphy master, the old man by the river, the boy at the soccer field, the film crews who built silence into story. He whispers to the statue, "We did it quietly." But victory does not erase the daily. He still rides the train when he can. Still buys his own groceries. Still walks at night through streets that don't care about trophies. And yet, something subtle has changed. The world sees him differently. Japan sees itself differently through him. Young actors speak of him not as legend, but as standard. A foreign critic calls him the still center of modern Japanese cinema. A director from Seoul says, "He makes humility cinematic." Every compliment feels less like a crown and more like a responsibility to protect what made it possible. Clarity, empathy, and precision. He returns home from a long press circuit and finds his mother watering plants on the balcony. She smiles. "You look tired." "I'm okay," he says, placing the award on the table. She glances at it once, then returns to the plants. After a long silence, she adds, "It's beautiful, but you were already enough." He nods. That night, he opens his notebook and writes, "The world noticed. I must not stop noticing it back." He sits by the window as dawn bleeds into the city, reflecting on what global recognition truly means. Not reach, not revenue, not headlines. It means connection, the proof that honesty, when repeated long enough, becomes universal. He smiles at the irony. To reach everyone, he had to stop trying to impress anyone. He has conquered the world quietly, through patience, not volume. But greatness, once found, must evolve or it becomes repetition. The artist within him hungers for new creation, a rebirth beyond acting, beyond fame. Chapter 22, The Reinvention. A room full of scripts sits untouched. Award envelopes stacked neatly in a drawer. The city outside hums the same tune of applause he once chased. And yet, Kento Yamazaki feels it again, the itch that comes not from ambition, but from becoming. He has reached everything they said was impossible. And now, that's precisely the problem. When the mountain flattens beneath your feet, the only way to keep climbing is to build a new one. Reinvention doesn't begin with a plan. It begins with discomfort, quiet, persistent, unignorable. Kento feels it while filming a commercial one morning. Dozens of people, perfect lighting, perfect takes. But in between the perfection, something breaks loose inside him, a voice asking, "What am I repeating?" That night, he looks through old footage of himself. Interviews, roles, awards, smiles rehearsed so often they lost edges. He pauses the screen. The man staring back looks composed, but caged. He whispers, "You've mastered control. Now learn to release." And that's when it begins. First, he disappears. No official statement. No scandal. Just absence. For 3 months, no interviews, no press, no updates. The industry speculates. Is he burned out? Is he done acting? Has he gone spiritual? He doesn't answer. He spends those months in Okinawa by the sea, waking at sunrise and filming waves on an old camera, not for a film but for memory. He edits nothing. He just observes. Every ripple looks different once you stop trying to capture it. One morning, he writes in his notebook, "Creation without intention, that's art reborn." Then comes the idea. Not a film. Not a performance. A collection of silence. He calls it Frames of Breath. A short, wordless series exploring the space between emotion and expression. No dialogue, no soundtrack, just raw fragments of human stillness. Faces, hands, air moving between gestures. His team doesn't understand at first. "Is this performance art?" someone asks. He smiles. It's not about anything. It just is. He finances it himself. Shoots it with a small crew of students. Edits it at home, between cups of green tea and the rhythm of rain. When it releases online, it doesn't explode, it seeps. People share it quietly, like a secret worth keeping. One comment says, "It feels like breathing after years of noise." That, he decides, is success. The project catches the attention of a film school in Europe. They invite him to lecture on minimalist performance and emotional geometry. He laughs when he reads the email. "Emotional geometry," he mutters. "I was just trying to breathe." Still, he goes. In a classroom filled with eager faces, he writes one sentence on the board. "Acting is not pretending. It's remembering." The students nod slowly. Some write it down, others just listen. He continues. "Remembering who we are without the mask. That's the only performance that matters." When the session ends, a student asks, "So what are you now? An actor, a teacher, a philosopher?" Kento smiles. "Maybe just awake." His reinvention deepens. He begins to write essays, reflections, fragments of thought. They're published quietly in a small Japanese magazine under the title The Art of Presence. He doesn't expect anyone to read them, but they spread, translated, reposted, underlined in cafes. Readers describe his words as a meditation disguised as prose. One line, in particular, goes viral. "The moment you stop performing, life begins to act through you." He doesn't own that line. He lives it. Soon, directors start approaching him differently. Not with roles, with questions. How do we make cinema feel alive again? What happens if we film truth instead of story? He collaborates, but only on projects that scare him artistically. He begins producing small films by young directors, ones who film in alleys instead of studios, who use pauses instead of explosions. He funds anonymously, mentors privately, teaches by watching, not instructing. A friend asks why he doesn't take credit. He replies, "The seed doesn't need to own the tree." In interviews, the few he accepts, journalists try to define this new phase. Some call it his Zen era. Others say he's transitioning to auteur. He corrects them softly. I'm not transforming into someone else. I'm returning to what I was before everyone had an opinion. He still acts, but differently now. No more grand gestures, no more cinematic heroics. Instead, his performances are carved from pauses and half-glances, the quiet choreography of being human. A critic writes, Yamazaki doesn't act the moment anymore, he allows it. He cuts the review out and pins it to his wall, not out of pride, but as a reminder, allow, don't control. In private, he experiments with direction. A short film first, one location, 2 actors, 1 emotion, forgiveness. The crew is small enough to fit in 1 van. They shoot in natural light, guided by intuition more than script. When he calls cut on the final scene, something inside him settles. For the first time, he feels both behind and in front of the story, a conductor of empathy. The film debuts at a local festival, winning nothing, yet moving everyone. A journalist asks if he's disappointed. He smiles. Awards recognize work. Silence recognizes truth. The industry eventually adapts to his rhythm. Producers learn to give him space. Fans learn to wait longer between projects. And the world, once impatient, learns that some art arrives like dawn, late, but inevitable. He writes one final note in his old, worn notebook. Reinvention is not changing direction. It's walking the same path with new awareness. He closes it and stores it away, next to the first one he ever owned, the one that began with his early struggles. 2 notebooks, 1 journey. He smiles. He's not chasing light anymore. He's becoming it. But even as the artist evolves, the boy inside him still whispers for home, for roots, for the soil that grew him. It's time to return, not as who he was, but as who he's become. Chapter 23, The Return to Roots. The plane window reflects a face both familiar and foreign. Kento Yamazaki watches the clouds drift below him, slow, unhurried, like thoughts that finally stopped running. Tokyo glimmers faintly in the distance. Home. He hasn't called it that in a long time. Not because he stopped belonging, but because belonging, for years, had meant being everywhere else. Now, as the wheels touch down, there's no red carpet, no press, no applause. Only the quiet hum of arrival. The kind of silence that greets you not as a celebrity, but as a son. He walks through the familiar streets of Itabashi. The corners still hold their old rhythm. The smell of steamed buns near the station. The chatter of school kids racing to beat the bell. The metallic clang of a distant shutter rolling open. The small shop he used to pass every morning still sells the same toys in the same dusty display. He stops, smiles, and bows lightly to the elderly owner sweeping the entrance. The man squints, tilts his head, then laughs. You grew taller, he says. Kento laughs back. Maybe just older. The old man waves dismissively. Same thing. For the first time in years, the exchange feels like oxygen. Fame doesn't exist here, only familiarity. He walks further, to a park that hasn't changed since childhood. The benches creak, the swing chains are rusted, and yet the place feels eternal, like memory preserved by ordinary lives. He sits, closes his eyes, and hears echoes of his younger self, the boy who played soccer until sunset, who dreamed of being a striker, not an actor. Back then, dreams were simpler. The world was smaller, but the heart was vast. He smiles at the irony. Success expanded the world, but shrank the simplicity. He whispers to the wind. You didn't fail. You just forgot to rest. And somehow, the wind seems to answer. Later that evening, he visits his parents. The house looks the same, but time has softened its colors. His mother opens the door before he knocks, as if she felt the air change. She hugs him without words. Inside, dinner is already set. Curry rice, miso soup, his father's favorite beer. They eat without performance. The silence between bites is not awkward, it's sacred. His father asks about work. Kento shrugs. It's steady. His mother smiles knowingly. That means you're happy. They don't talk about awards or premieres. They talk about the weather, the neighbors, a cousin's wedding. It's ordinary. It's perfect. After dinner, his father turns on an old variety show. Kento laughs at the jokes. The laughter sounds new, but feels ancient, the kind of laughter that predates ambition. Later, he finds his old soccer ball in a closet, half deflated, worn thin. He takes it outside, into the street where he first learned movement, rhythm, balance. Under the streetlight, he juggles it lazily, 1, 2, 3 touches before it slips away. It rolls under a parked car, and he laughs. A young boy across the street stares wide-eyed. "You're Kento Yamazaki," he blurts. Kento puts a finger to his lips. "Not tonight." The boy nods, grinning. "Then who are you?" He thinks for a moment. "Someone who still loves missing the ball." The boy giggles. "That's a good name." They play for 10 minutes, passing the ball back and forth until both are out of breath. Before leaving, the boy asks, "Are you making another show?" Kento answers, "Maybe. But first, I'm making time." The next morning, he visits his old high school. The gate guard recognizes him instantly, bows too deeply. Kento bows back, embarrassed. "I'm just visiting." The auditorium smells of chalk and nostalgia. He stands on the stage where he once watched others perform. This time, there's no audience, only sunlight slicing through dusty curtains. He walks to the center, breathes in, and whispers. This is where pretending ended and becoming began. For a moment, he imagines the younger him standing there, nervous and raw. He doesn't speak to that boy. He just listens. And in that silent dialogue, he feels the full circle close, not as an ending, but as a return. In the following weeks, he reconnects with mentors. An old acting coach, retired now, greets him with the same sharp gaze as decades ago. "You finally learned to stop acting," the coach says. Kento laughs. "It took a while." "Good," the coach replies. "Real artists arrive late." He visits a junior theater group, sits among kids rehearsing clumsy lines. Their energy fills the room, raw, messy, unfiltered. He helps one nervous girl deliver her line again, teaching her to breathe before speaking. When she gets it right, her face lights up. He feels something deeper than pride, continuity. Legacy, he thinks, is not leaving behind, it's passing along. In his quiet time, he begins sketching again, this time, not faces or eyes, but places. The noodle shop, the soccer field, the park bench, his parents' balcony. Each drawing, imperfect but honest, becomes a map of gratitude. He decides to compile them into a small art book, Return to Light. Half memoir, half meditation. He designs it himself. No publishers, no marketing, just a limited batch printed for friends, fans, and dreamers who once felt lost in noise. On the first page, he writes, "I went far to see the world, but it was home that taught me how to look." Months later, he walks by a cafe where young actors are discussing a role. They don't notice him, too absorbed in their own hopes. He listens from a distance, smiling. He hears echoes of his own past, ambition, confusion, purity. He leaves a note on their table before slipping away. It reads, "Keep your craft honest. The rest will find you." He doesn't sign it. They'll never know who wrote it. That makes it perfect. That night, he stands again by his window, overlooking Tokyo's skyline, alive, restless, infinite. He holds a cup of tea and realizes something rare. He's not seeking anymore. He's remembering. The boy from Harajuku, the actor from Shibuya, the man from Silence. All of them, one now. He smiles, turns off the light, and lets the city glow for him. The circle is complete, but the legacy is still writing itself. What remains is not fame, but influence without noise. He will give more than he takes, teach more than he tells. The artist has become the mentor. Chapter 24, Legacy in Progress. The studio lights hum like memory. No cameras, no audience, just a small crew, and Kento Yamazaki sitting at a table surrounded by young faces. They're actors, directors, writers, each carrying notebooks filled with hunger. They look at him the way he once looked at others, as if one sentence from his mouth might shift their entire orbit. He knows that look. He remembers being it. So he doesn't begin with advice. He begins with silence. "Why are you here?" he finally asks. A few hesitate. One answers, "To learn from you." He nods. "No. Why are you really here?" They exchange glances, unsure. He smiles. "Good. Confusion is the start of understanding." The tension breaks into laughter. He tells them he isn't there to teach technique or fame. He's there to teach something rarer: continuity, the thread between ambition and peace, between creation and conscience. Art, he says, isn't about the noise it makes. It's about what it leaves behind when the noise stops. Someone writes it down. He waves a hand. "Don't quote me. Live it." Over the next months, he mentors quietly, one project at a time. Not through masterclasses or interviews, but through presence. He visits small sets, stays until the last shot, eats box dinners with tired crews, and asks one question after wrap. "Did you love what you made?" If the answer is yes, he smiles. If the answer is no, he says, "Then start again tomorrow." There are no grades, no applause. Only growth. He funds short films without credit, helps independent directors secure grants, and coaches new actors privately in a rehearsal room smaller than a classroom. When asked why he gives so much time, he replies, "Because someone once waited for me to bloom. I owe that patience forward." In public, his appearances become rare, not out of distance, but purpose. When he does speak, his words are distilled. He no longer chases headlines. He cultivates echoes. At one event, a reporter asks him if he's retired. He laughs softly. "No, I'm just acting off camera now." The quote trends for weeks, but it's the part that didn't make the headline that matters most. The world doesn't need more performers. It needs more examples. He starts a foundation quietly, the Still Frame Initiative. Its purpose: to support young filmmakers who tell stories of empathy and discipline. The logo is simple, a single brushstroke in motion, unfinished by design. He doesn't attach his name to it. When journalists uncover his involvement, he downplays it. "It's not mine," he says. "It's everyone's turn now." Still, the initiative grows. Grants, mentorships, film festivals. Students call it a sanctuary for slow art in a fast world. He visits once a month, watching short films made on borrowed cameras and pure conviction. He claps the loudest, not for perfection, but for sincerity. At home, his life remains beautifully uneventful. He cooks, reads, writes, tends to a small bonsai he's been shaping for years. Its growth mirrors his own, deliberate, unseen, alive. Every morning he waters it with the same rhythm he once rehearsed lines. He whispers, "Still growing, huh?" The leaves answer in silence, which is enough. On his desk sits a small photograph, his parents smiling, the park swing behind them, the boy he once was blurred in the background. Beside it, an open notebook. The same handwriting, steadier now. "Legacy isn't what they remember of you," he's written. "It's what they remember of themselves because of you." His influence spreads without design. Actors who trained under him begin to win awards. Directors cite his mentorship in acceptance speeches. Film critics write about the Yamazaki school, cinema defined by empathy, minimalism, and silence as storytelling. He doesn't correct them, though he smiles at the irony. A man who once feared invisibility has become immortal precisely because he vanished into service. One evening, he returns to the river where the old man once said, "Today you're living." The man is gone now, but the bench remains. Kento sits, watches the water move under streetlights. A young couple nearby recognize him but hesitate to approach. He nods once, an invitation without intrusion. They smile, whisper a thank you he doesn't need to hear. It's then he understands. Legacy isn't noise. It's continuity of kindness. He closes his eyes and breathes. For the first time, he doesn't feel like an actor, or even a teacher. He feels like a current, one that moves without needing to be seen. In the following years, his legacy deepens quietly. He publishes a final collection of writings, Echoes in Still Water. It's not an autobiography, more like a map of reflections. Every chapter ends the same way. The story continues with you. Readers describe it as a mirror, soft, honest, awakening. It becomes a cult favorite among artists, thinkers, and dreamers across generations. On his 45th birthday, his foundation hosts a surprise event, 20 years of still frames. They screen his films, read his writings, share stories of his mentorship. When he enters the room, the crowd rises. He bows, a long, humble bow that quiets the applause into reverence. He takes the stage and says, "If you learned anything from me, let it be this: greatness is not a goal. It's a side effect of gratitude." The audience stands in silence, many with tears. For once, silence is not absence, it's worship. After the event, he walks outside into the Tokyo night. The air feels lighter than ever. He passes a billboard showing a new generation of actors, faces bright, hungry, unstoppable. He smiles, whispering, "Run well." Then he turns the corner, disappearing into the crowd. Not as a legend, not as a ghost, but as a man perfectly integrated with the rhythm he once chased. At home, the bonsai stands tall, its branches steady. He lights a candle and opens a blank page, not to write, but to listen. The pen rests still in his hand. He exhales slowly and says to the empty room, "I have given enough. The echo will continue." And with that, he smiles, the calm, eternal smile of someone who learned not to end, but to evolve. The echo of legacy never stops, it only changes frequency. For Kento Yamazaki, the story isn't finished, it's inherited. And somewhere, a young actor picks up a pen, writes the first line of his own journey. Chapter 25. The Quiet Storm. Dawn is a hush you can hear. The apartment is dim, the kettle murmurs, and the bonsai on the sill holds its own small posture against the coming day. Kento Yamazaki stands barefoot on the cool floorboards, palms open, breathing at the window. Tokyo is waking, trucks downshifting, trains sighing, a thin ribbon of light cutting the roofs in half. He watches it arrive with the calm attention of someone who has learned that being is a form of work. On the table, a blank page, a pen, and a folded schedule that he hasn't opened yet. There was a time when he measured himself by how full that page could get. Today, emptiness feels like alignment. He pours tea. Steam rises like handwriting. Outside, the city's pulse tightens. Inside, he settles. It has taken years to get here, to stand still without feeling like he is losing the race. The room holds its breath with him. Somewhere far off, thunder rolls. The forecast promised clear skies, but life prefers subplots. Clouds gather over the bay by mid-morning. Wind leans into alleys. Umbrellas bloom like quiet defenses. He has a meeting across town, a script he believes in, a director he trusts, and he leaves early, not to beat the weather, but to keep pace with it. On the train platform, an alert pings across phones. Typhoon advisory. People look up, not panicked, just adjusting. He smiles at the choreography of a city that has learned to bend without breaking. The carriage hums. A boy with headphones recognizes him, glances away, then back. Kento nods once, permission granted to say nothing. The boy grins to himself, rescued by the grace of privacy. He watches rain thread down the glass and thinks of all the storms he has learned to welcome, the early rejections that taught patience, the fame that taught boundaries, the losses that taught humility, the stillness that taught precision. Weather arrives. Weather leaves. What remains is posture. He writes in his notebook, steadying the letters with the sway of the train. Calm is not the absence of storms. It's the fluency to move inside them. By the time he reaches the studio, the storm has committed. Ropes creak. Tops slap their frames. The director greets him with gratitude disguised as logistics. We'll move the exterior to stage B, relight the corridor, pivot to the long take. It is the kind of day sets dread and artists remember. Kento hangs his coat, palms the wet from his hair, and steps into the new map without comment. Crew hustles, cables reroute, tension hovers like humidity. He centers himself the same way he always has. 5 breaths, eyes down, hands open. The scene is simple on paper, difficult in truth. A goodbye with no lines. A door that shuts on a decision the audience will only feel. The camera will track him down a hallway in a single unblinking shot. No music. No cut to rescue him. Just presence. Ready? The operator asks. He nods. Let the lens come to me. Action. He walks. Not as a star, not as myth, as a man who has learned that the smallest movement can carry a life. Every step lands with intention measured in millimeters. At the door, he pauses just long enough to let regret bloom and fade. His hand lifts, stalls, lowers, a choreography of choices. The storm rattles the rafters. He doesn't rush. He doesn't slow. He allows. Cut. Silence. Then the director exhales a laugh that sounds like relief. We have it, she says, surprised at how easy the hard thing looked. He bows. We had the weather, he answers, and the crew smiles because they know what he means. Some days, the world gives you the sound your soul has been rehearsing. At lunch, the power flickers. Phone notifications spike with the chaos of rumor, a headline twisting an old interview into new noise, a thread pretending to be truth. The room tenses the way people do when lightning counts too close to thunder. His assistant starts to speak. He shakes his head gently. Eat, he says. He puts the phone face down, picks up chopsticks, and begins. Between bites, he tells a story about the first time he froze in front of a camera and how the awkwardness saved him from an acting style that would have ruined him. People laugh. Tension evaporates. The rumor shrinks to the size it deserves. He has become the weather he once feared. When the day wraps, he offers a quiet thank you to each department by name. Grip, sound, costuming, camera. The PA who sprinted in the rain and never asked to be seen. He signs one poster for a lighting tech's daughter and writes, "Your father makes movies glow, because it is both kind and accurate." Outside, Tokyo glistens, streets pooled with night. The storm loosens its grip, the air tastes washed. He decides to walk home. No umbrella. He lets the rain meet his face the way applause used to, without needing it to last. At a crosswalk, a young actor he mentored years ago spots him from under a shop canopy. The kid jogs over, tries to hold his umbrella above both their heads, fails, laughs. "Sensei, I just wrapped my first lead." He says it like confession and prayer. Kento's smile is unguarded. "Did you love what you made?" The kid swallows. "Yes." "Then rest well," Kento says, "and hide from nothing." The signal changes. The kid bows too deep and runs back. Kento steps into the road with the steady cadence of someone who knows the pace of his life now by heart. Home again, he towels off, boils water, and opens the schedule he'd left folded. It's full, a film he will direct next spring, a mentorship week at the foundation, a flight to speak at a school that wrote him as if they were asking a friend to dinner. He scans for urgency and finds none. Everything important has learned to wait. He smiles, grateful to the younger him who built this version of time. He lights a single candle. The bonsai's shadow looks like a mountain. He sits and writes a last line for the day. Impermanence is not a threat. It is the canvas. He closes the notebook and lets the ink dry. Later, the rain quits utterly. The city breathes. He steps onto the balcony, elbows on the rail, forehead cooled by air that smells like metal and leaf. Below, a cyclist cuts a clean S through reflected neon. Above, clouds peel back to show a modest, fearless moon. What remains after storms is not wreckage, he thinks. It's outline, the sharpened edge of what matters. He feels the outline in his bones now. Truth before speed, presence before spectacle, kindness before credit. The shape of a life that refuses to be borrowed by fame. He speaks to the night, not as performance, but as practice. Less beauty, more truth. Less noise, more note. Less control, more grace. The words have no audience and all the meaning. He returns inside, tidies the table, and places the folded schedule beneath the blank page. If tomorrow never came, he thinks, today would still be complete. Not because of accomplishment, but because of alignment, with work, with weather, with the quiet music that lives behind the eyes. He turns off the light. The apartment holds the kind of darkness that isn't empty. It's full of listening. The city hum lowers to a comfortable key. Somewhere, far away, thunder mutters a last goodbye. He lies down, a small storm at peace, and lets sleep arrive like a curtain falling gracefully on an act that knows its worth. This is where his story stands, not ended, but awake. The quiet is not silence, it's signal. The storm is not fury, it's focus. And what remains for you listening now is not his fame but his permission to breathe in chaos, to choose presence over performance, to become the calm you've been searching for. In a world that screams for attention, Kento Yamazaki built his empire in silence. He taught us that power doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives with presence. His journey is a mirror for anyone who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, or forgotten. Because the truth is this: the world eventually hears the ones who never stopped listening to themselves. And if you remember one thing from his story, let it be this: still waters run deep, and the quiet storm within you might just change the world.